The sharp trill of a woodpecker echoed through the forest. The group of birdwatchers froze, eyes instantly scanning the treetops. "There," one of them whispered, pointing at a flash of red feathers among the leaves.
"Just a cardinal," the guide said, his voice calm and steady. "They're common here. Let's keep going. There's a nesting site of robins up ahead."
The group followed him along the trail, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches. A pale blue cluster of eggs nestled in a nearby branch soon caught their attention. Quiet murmurs of admiration rippled through the group as they gazed upon the fragile sight. But the guide's focus had shifted. His eyes were locked on a vine curling tightly around an oak tree. It didn't look like anything native. Its edges were tinged with deep purple, and tiny, green thorns glinted faintly in the sunlight.
"Stay here,"
he said, lowering his binoculars. His tone was a mix of curiosity and unease. The guide stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the forest floor. Up close, the vine seemed even stranger. Its leaves were glossy, catching the sunlight in an almost unnatural way. They moved slightly. It was a subtle, deliberate motion. Something wasn't right.
"What is that?"
someone called out, breaking away from the rest of the group.
"Not sure,"
the guide replied, crouching down for a closer look. His fingers hovered over the vine, hesitating.
"Doesn't look familiar. Might be invasive."
He leaned in, careful not to touch it. The vine shifted slightly, its leaves trembling, even though the air was still. The guide hesitated. The movement wasn't natural.
"Strange,"
he murmured, stepping back. The forest had gone quiet, the birdsong fading into silence. His hand hovered just above the vine. Its glossy leaves rippled faintly, almost as if aware of his presence. He frowned, shaking his head to push away the unsettling thought.
"Let me just..."
he began, reaching out cautiously. The vine exploded into motion, a blur of green that struck before anyone could react. It lashed out, twisting like a whip, and coiled around his arm with terrifying precision. Gasps come up from the group as the plant tightened its grip, its thorns sinking into the guide's skin. Blood welled up, dark red against the vine's purple leaves.
"What the..."
the guide shouted, yanking his arm back. The vine only tightened, digging deeper.
"Help him!"
someone screamed, panic in their voice. The group were caught between disbelief and fear. The guide thrashed, clawing at the vine with his free hand, but the plant moved with purpose, shifting and tightening with every attempt to break free.
"Get it off!"
he yelled, his voice cracking as the pain grew unbearable. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the forest floor. The group stepped closer but stopped, their fear rooting them in place. His body convulsed violently, cries turning to guttural gasps as his muscles seized.
"What's happening to him?"
a woman whispered, clutching her binoculars like they might protect her. The guide's face twisted in agony, his eyes wide and glassy.
"It burns!"
he choked out, his voice raw.
"It's inside!"
Thorns dug deeper, drawing fresh blood that dripped onto the soil in thick, dark streams. The guide's body jerked again, the burning spreading as though fire coursed through his veins. A younger birdwatcher took a step forward, gripping a branch as a makeshift tool.
"Maybe we can..."
The vine lashed out before they could finish, a tendril snapping toward them with violent force. They stumbled back with a sharp scream, dropping the branch as they narrowly avoided its grasp.
"Stay back,"
another voice warned, pulling them further away. The guide's convulsions began to slow, his movements reduced to faint, agonized twitches. The vine loosened its grip slightly, almost as if satisfied with its work. His ragged breaths filled the silence as the group huddled together in terror. The forest seemed to darken, the once bright morning light fractured by shadows. The air grew heavy, the chirps and rustles of wildlife replaced by an oppressive quiet. The guide trembled on the ground, his breath shallow and uneven. The vine writhed around his arm, its movements erratic yet deliberate. Every attempt to help had only made it worse. No one dared move now. Then, with a guttural yell of desperation, the guide fumbled for his pocket. His shaking fingers closed around a small knife. The blade flicked open with a sharp click, glinting in the sunlight.
"Hold still,"
someone called out, their voice trembling. The guide didn't need the advice. There was no time for precision. Gritting his teeth, he brought the blade down on the vine, sawing at its base with furious strokes. The plant seemed to sense the danger. Its tendrils convulsed, tightening their grip as if in protest. The thorn sank deeper, tearing his skin and drawing fresh streams of blood. He let out a strangled cry, pushing harder. With a final desperate stroke, the vine snapped. A piece of it remained attached to his arm, its grip loosening but still embedded in his flesh. The severed length thrashed briefly on the ground before retreating back toward the tree like a wounded predator. The guide stumbled back, clutching his arm. His face was pale, beads of sweat dripping from his brow. His legs wobbled beneath him, barely holding him upright.
"Let's get out of here,"
he whispered, his voice hoarse. The group sprang into action. 2 of them rushed to his side, draping his arms over their shoulders to support him. The others circled protectively around them, their eyes darting to every shadow in the forest. They moved as quickly as they could, each step feeling like an eternity. Their breaths came in short, panicked bursts as they hurried down the trail, glancing back over their shoulders. Behind them, the vine swayed gently, its leaves shimmering as though nothing had happened. They reached the trailhead just as dusk began to settle over the forest. The guide dropped onto a fallen log, struggling to catch his breath. One of the group members pulled out a first aid kit, their hands trembling as they worked to wrap his arm. The piece of vine embedded in his skin oozed a dark, sticky sap that seemed anything but natural.
"Are you okay?"
someone asked, their voice tight with urgency. The guide shook his head, his face pale and haunted.
"That thing,"
he muttered, his eyes flicking nervously back toward the forest.
"I've never seen anything like it."
The group exchanged uneasy glances. One of them pulled out their phone and began scrolling through the photos they had taken earlier. The images of the vine were sharp, its thorns gleaming in the sunlight.
"You need to tell someone,"
another said, holding the phone out to the guide. The local authorities were less than impressed. The small office smelled of stale coffee and damp paper. The guide sat stiffly across from a disinterested officer, his arm heavily bandaged and his face tight with pain.
"So you're saying a plant attacked you?"
the officer asked, his tone filled with skepticism.
"You sure it wasn't just poison ivy? That stuff can make people itch like crazy." "It wasn't poison ivy,"
the guide snapped, his exhaustion giving his voice an edge. He placed the photos and his scrawled notes on the desk, his hand shaking slightly.
"Look, this isn't normal. You won't find this in any field guide."
The officer picked up the photos, his expression unreadable as he studied them.
Looks like some overgrown kudzu to me,"
he said with a shrug, sliding them back across the desk.
"Maybe you brushed up against it too hard."
The guide's frustration bubbled over.
"You're not listening. It moved. It wrapped around me like a snake. It's alive."
The officer sighed, leaning back in his chair.
"Look, I'll file a report, okay? But there's not much we can do about an aggressive plant. Just stay away from that area."
The guide stormed out, his jaw tight and his hands balled into fists. The officer's dismissive words stung, but he refused to let them be the end of it. That night, he gathered his notes, the photographs, and every detail he could remember. He sent the information to a network of environmental organizations, determined to find someone who would take him seriously. Unbeknownst to the guide, his evidence reached the hands of people far more willing to act. Deep within the SCP Foundation, a file was opened.
"Unusual predatory behavior, vines with anomalous mobility, possible biohazard,"
an agent read aloud, their tone brisk.
"Send a team,"
their superior replied without hesitation.
"If even half of this is true, it's worth containment."
And just like that, the Foundation's attention turned to the quiet forest, its secret no longer hidden. Darkness had fallen over the forest. The once inviting paths were now cloaked in shadows. The Foundation vehicles rolled to a halt just beyond the trailhead, their engines settling into an ominous, low growl before cutting out completely. The agents stepped out one by one, their movements swift and efficient. Dressed in tactical gear, their faces were concealed behind reflective visors, their presence unnerving in the stillness.
"We'll retrace the path described in the report,"
the lead agent said, unfolding a map and gesturing to the trail ahead.
"Stay sharp. We treat this like any other anomaly until proven otherwise."
The team moved in formation, their boots crunching softly on the forest floor. Floodlights mounted to their gear cast sharp beams of light into the surrounding darkness. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig set nerves on edge, but they pressed forward, their discipline unshaken.
"Eyes on the target,"
came a whisper from the rear of the team. Ahead, the vine came into view. It was unmistakably larger than the photos had shown. The leaves, tinged with deep purple, shimmered faintly under the pale moonlight. The green thorns glinted menacingly, sharper than the initial report suggested. Coiled tightly around the tree, the vine's tendrils stretched outward, almost as if searching for something. Or someone. The lead agent raised a hand, signaling the team to halt.
Thermal scan,
they ordered, their tone steady despite the weight of the moment. The team prepared, their equipment whirring faintly in the silence, as the forest seemed to watch. One of the agents stepped forward, wielding a handheld device. The screen flickered to life, displaying a map of heat signatures. A faint glow pulsed from the vine's core, growing brighter with each passing second.
It's reacting to us,
the agent murmured, lowering the scanner. The vine shifted slightly, its tendrils stretching toward the nearest source of heat. The team deployed a robotic arm, its mechanical joints clicking softly as it extended toward the vine. At the end of the arm, a set of shears gleamed under the floodlights, ready to cut. The vine responded instantly. A tendril lashed out, striking the arm with enough force to send it jerking backward. The operator tightened their grip on the controls, steadying the machine and maneuvering it away from another attack.
Defensive behavior,
the lead agent noted, their voice calm despite the rising tension.
Log its movements.
The robotic arm adjusted its approach, swinging wide before darting in. The shears snapped shut, slicing off a small section of the vine. The severed piece writhed violently. It was quickly secured in a containment tube, the lid sealing with a sharp hiss. The main vine grew more aggressive. Tendrils shot out, reaching toward the team with deliberate precision. The agents stepped back, moving cautiously, but keeping their lights trained on the advancing plant.
It's targeting warm bodies,
one agent said, watching the tendrils stretch toward them. Another glanced at the thermal scanner.
The heat signature spikes every time it moves. It's hunting.
The lead agent raised a hand.
Fall back. Keep your distance.
The team retreated, their movements careful as the vine continued its relentless pursuit. Its tendrils stretched further, nearly brushing the boot of the outermost agent before recoiling. Once they reached a safe distance, the lead agent activated their comm.
Sample secured. Behavior documented. Returning to base.
The forest remained eerily silent as the team disappeared into the shadows, the vine's tendrils twitching, as if it were already planning its next move. The agents exchanged wary glances, their steps quickening as they left the vine behind. The forest seemed darker now, every shadow a potential threat. Their focus was broken by a rustling in the underbrush. A raccoon emerged, its small eyes glinting in the beams of their lights. It sniffed the air, drawn toward the strange, sweet scent emanating from the vine.
Hold position,
the lead agent whispered, raising a hand to stop the team. The raccoon scurried closer, its curiosity leading it straight to the vine. It stood on its hind legs, pawing tentatively at the purple-tinged leaves.
Should we intervene?
One agent asked quietly, their voice tight with unease. Before anyone could respond, the vine reacted. A tendril shot out with terrifying speed, coiling around the raccoon's midsection. The animal let out a sharp cry, clawing at the vine as it tightened. More tendrils followed, wrapping around its limbs and neck. The thorns pierced through fur and flesh, eliciting a final, pitiful shriek. The agents watched in horrified silence as the raccoon's struggles grew weaker. The vine pulsed as it siphoned the animal's fluids. Within moments, the raccoon's body collapsed inward, its form reduced to a shriveled husk.
Unbelievable,
an agent muttered under their breath, their voice barely audible. The lead agent's expression hardened.
We've seen enough. This thing isn't just an anomaly. It's a predator. Containment is critical.
A new urgency gripped the team as they returned to their staging area. The severed piece of the vine writhed sluggishly within its containment tube.
Bring the reinforced container,
the lead agent ordered. An agent wheeled over a stainless steel case, its polished surface reflecting the harsh lights. Inside, layers of non-reactive material lined the container, designed to prevent any breach. Stainless steel had been chosen specifically because the plant couldn't penetrate metal.
Careful,
one agent murmured as the vine was transferred into the container. They worked methodically, ensuring no part of the specimen was left exposed. The lid closed with a satisfying click, the airtight seals engaging with a hiss. The team double-checked every seal, then checked them again.
Container is secure,
the handler confirmed, stepping back cautiously. The lead agent nodded.
Good. Let's make sure we leave nothing behind.
The group scoured the area, scanning for any fragments or spores that might have escaped during the transfer. Tools were sterilized, disposable gear sealed in hazardous materials bags, and every piece of equipment meticulously cleaned.
All clear,
another agent reported after completing the sweep. The team loaded the sealed container into their vehicle, each member moving with heightened caution. They all knew what was at stake. The vine wasn't just an anomaly to study, it was a predator waiting to spread. Failure wasn't an option. The arrival at the Foundation site should have been routine. The transport team moved with precision, unloading the reinforced container into the sterile transfer zone. Bright artificial lights illuminated the laboratory. Nearby, a hydroponic growth chamber stood ready, its glass walls bristling with sensors and automated irrigation systems. A small group of researchers and technicians gathered around, their attention fixed on the container. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation, an undercurrent of excitement barely masking the tension.
Careful with the transfer,
the lead scientist instructed, their eyes glued to the tablet in their hands. Their tone was firm, carrying the weight of prior warnings.
This specimen has already demonstrated its lethality. Let's not add another casualty tonight.
The container hissed softly, a faint exhalation, as its seals disengaged with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the sterile chamber, amplifying the weight of the moment. Two technicians moved forward, methodically guiding robotic arms toward the container's edge. Every movement was measured, deliberate. Then came a pause. A junior researcher edged closer, their curiosity overriding caution. They leaned in, their gloved hand moving toward the vine, seeking a better view.
"What are you doing?"
a senior colleague snapped, their voice sharp with alarm. It was too late. The vine exploded from the container, its tendrils moving with impossible speed. They lashed out, coiling around the researcher's arm in an instant. The force sent them staggering backward, a strangled cry escaping their lips.
"Get back!"
the lead scientist shouted, slamming the emergency alarm. Red lights flared, bathing the room in an ominous glow, and a shrill klaxon pierced the air. The researcher's body stiffened as the vine tightened its grip. Tendrils snaked around their torso and neck, pulling them to the floor. Their panicked gasps filled the room as their colleagues scrambled to intervene.
"Cut it loose!"
a technician yelled, grabbing a pair of long-handled shears, but the vine was faster. Its thorns sank deep, the pulsing rhythm of the tendrils intensifying. The researchers' struggles faltered, then ceased entirely. Their body began to collapse inward, skin and muscle withering as though drained of life. Within moments, they were a husk, hollow, lifeless.
"Pull back!"
the lead scientist barked, their voice cutting through the chaos. The team retreated, their faces pale as the vine retracted into its container with unnerving calm. Its movements were slow now, deliberate, almost satisfied. The breach prompted immediate action. The laboratory was sealed, the remains of the researcher incinerated, and the containment protocols underwent an urgent overhaul. The surviving specimen was relocated to a new containment unit, a custom-designed stainless steel planter housed within a hydroponic chamber. The planter's non-porous material ensured that the vine's roots could not extend beyond its confines. Automated systems managed its environment, providing water, nutrients, and controlled lighting without human intervention. The chamber itself was fitted with emergency failsafes. Retractable circular blades, sharp enough to sever the toughest organic material, were installed around the planter. These could be deployed instantly at the first sign of anomalous behavior. The walls of the chamber were reinforced, and observation windows were replaced with high-definition cameras to eliminate the need for direct human interaction.
"From this point forward," the lead scientist announced during the debriefing, "all contact with this specimen will be conducted using remotely operated robotics. No personnel will enter the containment room under any circumstances."
This anomaly, now formally designated as SCP-307, required stringent measures. The new protocols were unyielding. Any signs of anomalous activity would trigger an automated lockdown, complete with lethal countermeasures to neutralize the threat. Inside the chamber, SCP-307 appeared dormant. Its tendrils curled loosely within the stainless steel planter, swaying faintly as the automated irrigation system activated. But those who monitored the camera feeds noticed something unsettling. The plant seemed to stir, subtly and almost imperceptibly, whenever a warm body moved in the observation room beyond. For now, the containment held. But those familiar with SCP-307's behavior knew one chilling truth. It was waiting. Bright floodlights illuminated the chamber as researchers prepared for the next phase of testing. Beyond the reinforced glass, a robotic arm extended toward the planter, carrying a small cage. Inside, a white lab mouse pressed against the bars, its whiskers twitching in nervous anticipation.
Releasing test subject,
came the announcement over the intercom. The cage door slid open, and the mouse scurried out onto the chamber floor. For a moment, nothing happened. SCP-307's tendrils remained motionless as the mouse sniffed the air, hesitating as it neared the planter. Then, the vine struck. With blinding speed, a tendril snapped forward, wrapping tightly around the mouse's midsection. The animal let out a high-pitched squeak, its body contorting in vain against the plant's relentless grip. More tendrils followed, coiling around its limbs and head with a precision that was as efficient as it was horrifying.
Predation time 6 seconds,
the researcher noted, their voice clinical, masking the tension in the room.
No external injuries observed beyond thorn penetration.
As quickly as it had struck, the vine released its prey. The mouse's withered remains crumpled to the floor, its body drained of fluids. The tendrils retracted, curling back into a poised, waiting position, as though the attack had never occurred. Over the following weeks, SCP-307 endured rigorous environmental testing. Researchers experimented with extreme temperatures, humidity levels, and varying light conditions, hoping to discover a weakness. But the results were the same every time. SCP-307 thrived. Extreme cold, high heat, desiccation, it's unfazed, a researcher summarized during a briefing, their tone heavy with unease.
Its growth doesn't slow no matter the conditions. It's practically unkillable.
Detailed analysis of SCP-307's thorns and roots revealed more unsettling facts. The thorns contained a powerful compound capable of paralyzing prey within seconds. Meanwhile, the roots displayed an extraordinary cellular structure, allowing them to penetrate nearly any material, organic or inorganic. Stainless steel was one of the few exceptions, justifying its continued use in containment. But the most alarming revelations came during behavioral experiments. In one test, multiple prey animals were introduced into the chamber simultaneously. SCP-307 reacted immediately. Its tendrils moved with eerie precision, targeting vital areas, throats, limbs, torsos, immobilizing each animal in seconds. The plant's movements were efficient and deliberate, conserving energy while ensuring maximum effectiveness.
It's not just reacting,
a researcher noted in a debriefing.
It's calculating, prioritizing. We've started calling it Spider Ivy for a reason.
Another experiment deepened the sense of dread. When robotic arms were introduced into the chamber, SCP-307 adapted. Its tendrils maneuvered with flanking tactics, cornering the mechanical devices in a way that suggested deliberate strategy. The plant wasn't simply hunting. It was learning. The nickname Spider Ivy quickly evolved into a cautionary label. The danger became undeniable during a routine test involving a D-class subject. Outfitted in a reinforced suit, the subject was instructed to approach SCP-307 with a thermal scanner. As soon as they entered the chamber, the plant's tendrils twitched, reacting to the heat signature.
Maintain a 2-meter distance,
the lead researcher warned over the intercom. But SCP-307 had other plans. A tendril shot out far beyond its usual range, coiling around the D-Class's arm. The suit, designed for protection, offered little resistance. Thorns pierced through the material, delivering their paralyzing venom. The subject screamed, their body jerking as the plant tightened its hold.
"Deploy blades!"
the lead researcher barked. The failsafe system activated immediately. Circular blades descended, slicing through the tendrils with mechanical precision. Severed sections of the vine thrashed wildly, releasing the D-Class, who crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath. But the crisis wasn't over. The severed pieces of SCP-307 began growing autonomously, tendrils snaking across the chamber floor and reaching for the walls. Their rapid expansion was unlike anything the team had observed before.
"Seal the room!"
came the urgent command. Doors slammed shut as the containment team scrambled to regain control. The plant's new growth shriveled under the assault, curling inward as its predatory expansion was halted. By the time the room was officially declared safe, the D-Class subject lay motionless on the floor, their body grotesquely altered. An autopsy later revealed the horrifying extent of SCP-307's invasion. A small breach near the faceplate of the insulating suit had allowed a tendril, labeled Vine B, to penetrate the subject's body. Inside, the results mirrored those of previous animal tests. The internal organs were gone, replaced by an intricate network of roots that extended throughout the skeletal structure. At the core of this network, a seed was discovered lodged within the subject's skull. Shoots had already begun to sprout toward the eye sockets, the beginnings of another growth cycle. The remains of the D-Class subject were promptly incinerated, the grim findings reinforcing the plant's terrifying adaptability and the deadly consequences of any containment failure. SCP-307 has since been formally classified as Keter. This anomaly was a stark reminder that even nature's simplest creations could become its most terrifying.
The girl sighs and slumps in her seat, kicking at the back of the bucket seat in front of her. Her mother, sitting in the car's front passenger side seat, doesn't even notice. She's too busy taking photographs out the window and chattering with her husband, who's driving the car. That's all they've been doing all day, and the girl is sick to death of it. Her parents dragged her on this stupid vacation trip, and now she's got to waste her whole summer away from her friends. She stares out the window and watches the pastoral countryside slide past. The quaint little villages and rolling hillsides really excite her parents, but she could not care less. Mom and Dad planned this family vacation across Europe for months, but she would much rather have gone someplace interesting instead. There are only so many boring old castles and stupid cathedrals that you can look at before you just lose your mind. The girl sighs and crosses her arms across her chest in silent resignation. "Guess we're just gonna look at more dumb buildings," she mutters. "Honey, can you stop that? Your father worked really hard to put this trip together, and the least you could do is pretend to have a good time," says her mother, momentarily lowering her camera to berate her ungrateful daughter.
Huh?
It's the first time that her mother has acknowledged her all day. "I think you're really gonna like today's itinerary," says her father, grinning as if he's got a delicious secret that he can't wait to share. "We know it's been hard for you spending your whole summer away from home, so today we're gonna do something just for you." "Uh-huh," says the girl. "Sure, Dad." She rolls her eyes and pulls out a cell phone. At least she can still get internet access out here. Desperate for something to distract her from the monotony of this car trip, she quickly scrolls through her feed and reads all the notes that her friends back home are posting. She frowns. Her classmates are all posting about the latest blockbuster film in the girl's favorite media franchise, Vampire Boyfriend. She grits her teeth. She likes to consider herself a Vampire Boyfriend superfan. She's a well-known poster in the Vampire Boyfriend online community, famous for her fanfiction, as well as her own original character, Vampire Girlfriend. In fact, her writing is somewhat controversial. A lot of Vampire Boyfriend purists have accused her character Vampire Girlfriend of being a Mary Sue, and they object to her stories where a Vampire Boyfriend meets and falls madly in love with her, to the point that he forgets his canon lover from the film series, Vampire Wife. She's annoyed to see that her friends got to see the new Vampire Boyfriend movie on opening night, while she's stuck out here on this stupid family vacation. The movie won't premiere in Europe for another few months, and there's no way she's going to be able to avoid spoilers for that long. Everything about this situation seems tailor-made to irritate her, and the excited giggles of her parents in the front of the car as they exchange knowing glances are only annoying her more. "Trust me, you're gonna love this," says her father again. He peers at an unfolded road map in his lap, mutters something under his breath, and turns the car off the main highway and onto a narrow gravel road. The girl grits her teeth as the car rattles over the uneven ground so hard that it nearly jostles her cell phone from her grasp. She tries to distract herself by typing some notes to herself, plot points for the latest Vampire Boyfriend fanfiction that she's working on. In her new story, Vampire Girlfriend is going to be kidnapped by werewolves, leading Vampire Boyfriend to have an existential crisis as he struggles to find meaning in a world without his beloved. She makes a note that Vampire Girlfriend should look, dress, and talk just like her. After all, she imagines, wouldn't she be the perfect match for Vampire Boyfriend? She pauses, a momentary dreamy expression on her face, as she imagines how much better a weekend together with Vampire Boyfriend would be compared to this boring car trip. "This can't be right," mumbles her father, scanning the horizon. "But the directions said..." Suddenly he brightens up. "Oh, there it is! Playland!" The girl cranes her neck to see that the car is fast approaching what appears to be a little carnival at the end of the road. She rolls her eyes. Oh, great. Of course, her parents would take her here. First, they bore her with endless visits to museums and historical sites, and now, when they want to make it all up to her, they take her to a carnival for babies. She's not a kid anymore, but her parents still think that this sort of goofy nonsense should excite her. "I know you've been bored going to all the historical sites with us, Honey Pumpkin," says her father as he pulls the car into a parking spot and applies the brake. "That's why I asked the hotel concierge if there was anything good around here for kids. And wouldn't you know it, the next morning, what did I find shoved under our door? 3 free tickets." He holds up the tickets as if they were a trophy he'd won. The girl's mother nods approvingly. "Now that's good service. I hope you left him a big tip." The girl groans. "You can't be serious, Dad. A carnival? What, do you expect me to ride on the teacups or something? I'm 15. I'm not a dumb baby anymore." "Language, young lady," admonishes her mother as she unbuckles her seatbelt. "Your father worked really hard to find this place just for you. The least you could do is show a little gratitude for once." "Oh, you think you're too old now," says her father. "But I bet once we see some of these rides, boy, I'll bet you feel just like a kid again." He inhales deeply. Even inside the car, the unmistakable fair smells of funnel cake and corn dogs are in the air. "You smell that? It smells like fun." "Sure, fun." The girl pockets her cell phone. The family exits the car and walks toward the Playland gate, where they're greeted by a costumed employee. "Welcome to Playland," announces the employee in a chipper voice. "Your favorite amusement park. When you're at Playland, you'll find that the worries of the day melt away, and it's time for play." "Oh, you speak English," says the father. He turns to the mother. "See? Now that's service." He hands over the complimentary tickets. The employee takes them with a smile and a flourish, and then ushers the family through the gate. The girl, however, can't stop staring at the gatekeeper. If she didn't know any better, she would think that he was dressed like Vampire Boyfriend. But that doesn't make any sense. It must just be a coincidence. But once they enter the park, she sees that all the employees are dressed like Vampire Boyfriend. The guy standing behind the counter of the ring toss booth, the guy manning the balloon station. The uniform for this park looks like the outfit that she imagined Vampire Boyfriend would be wearing in her first fanfiction story. "Wait," says the girl, staring up at the bundle of helium balloons floating above the balloon vendor. Each balloon bears the name Vampire Boyfriend and the fanged bat logo of the film series. So it's not a coincidence at all? This theme park really is themed after her favorite films? Her father notices her change of expression, and he nudges her in the ribs. Eh? I told you that you like it. This is all about those movies you like so much, huh? Ghost Boyfriend or whatever? "It's Vampire Boyfriend, Dad," she says distantly, but she's too mesmerized by her surroundings to put much feeling into the barb. "How much for a balloon?" asks her father, pulling open his wallet and quickly thumbing through a stack of local currency. "Oh, no charge," says the balloon vendor brightly. He plucks a string from the bundle and hands it over. "Everything's free for our valued special ticket holders." "Well, would you listen to that?" says her father. He replaces his wallet in his back pocket. "Now, this is the kind of carnival that I wish we had back in the States." The girl awkwardly takes the proffered balloon. She feels silly holding it, but she's more confused about why it's free. The whole point of offering free entry into a carnival is to gouge people with overpriced rides and souvenirs, right? But everywhere she looks, she can't help but notice signs advertising free corn dogs and bumper cars, unlimited rides for $0. How can this carnival make enough money to keep operating if it's not charging for anything? In fact, how can this carnival make enough money to keep operating when it's based around a niche film like Vampire Boyfriend? Are there really that many Vampire Boyfriend fans out here to keep this place in business? Not that there's anyone else around. As she scans her surroundings, she realizes that, while there are plenty of costume employees bustling around the fair, she doesn't see any other fair goers. It's as if this whole carnival was created and maintained solely for her benefit. "Hey, Pumpkin, how about a ride? I bet you'd love to try out some bumper cars, huh?" says her father. "How about we go for a race, and you can see if you can beat your old man, huh?" He points to a bumper car ride across the midway. The girl stares. Like all the other rides, it's covered in Vampire Boyfriend murals. This one depicts a young woman running away from a pack of werewolves, and the young woman looks exactly like the girl. It couldn't be. But there's no other explanation. The young woman in the mural matches exactly the description of the girl's character Vampire Girlfriend from her fanfiction story, and the image of the werewolves looks like it's an illustration of the scene where Vampire Girlfriend gets kidnapped. How could this be? Could it be that the artist, obviously a fan of the Vampire Boyfriend films, is also familiar with her fanfiction? But even if that was the case, it's absurd to think that he would use it as an inspiration for a theme park ride. Who other than her would possibly recognize this scene? Says the girl's mother, walking up behind her and peering at the mural. "Why, that girl looks just like you." "I know, she does," says the girl quickly. It's almost a relief to know that her mother has also noticed the resemblance. At least it means that she's not imagining things. At the same time, she feels a twinge of guilt. Readers online are always accusing her of using Vampire Girlfriend as a thinly disguised self-insert. Seeing this larger-than-life picture of Vampire Girlfriend makes her think that there might be some merit to the accusation. "Come on, you lot, stop worrying about some old picture and let's have some fun," says her father. He offers money to the ticket taker parked behind the kiosk, but the man merely shakes his head. "Your money is no good here, sir," says the ticket taker. "The bumper cars are free for our favored guests today." Their father clambers into the rink and ambles toward a bumper car. Her mother tugs at the girl's arm as if to encourage her to join in, but the girl resists. "Come on, what's gotten into you?" says her mother. "This place is just weird," says the girl. "Like, half the stuff here isn't even from the official vampire boyfriend lore. It's all stuff that I made up for my stories." Her mother rolls her eyes in annoyance. "Really? We go to all this trouble to find something that you would like to do, and all you want to do is complain?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. Is there some problem here?" The family is startled as another employee walks up to them. He's also dressed like Vampire Boyfriend, and a wide smile is plastered across his face. "You folks look like you're upset about something." "You're damn right I'm upset about something," yells the girl. In her rage, she throws her drink at the employee. He barely reacts as the cup explodes against his chest, dousing him with sticky soda. "What's going on here? Where did you hear about Vampire Girlfriend?" "Ma'am, Playland is designed to give every visitor the perfect experience," says the employee blandly. "That's not good enough. Tell me what's going on here." The employee's attitude changes on a dime. His bright smile fades, and suddenly his tone turns stern. "Ma'am, I'm afraid that you're going to ruin everyone's fun if you keep up this sort of behavior. We like to keep things fun here at Playland. If you want to spoil the fun, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." "Fine, then we'll leave." "Oh, come on, young lady, we just got here," snaps her mother. "We literally drove all day to get here and you want to leave after just one ride? You don't even like rides." "There's a principal involved here," says her father sternly as he saunters up. "Young lady, if that's your attitude, then I think maybe you should go wait in the car, because your mother and I intend to have a good time." The girl doesn't have a chance to argue. The employee rests his hands heavily on her shoulders and turns her around. "Don't worry, folks. We'll escort her back to your car. You can join her as well when you're ready." The girl cannot believe what's happening. The employee politely but firmly steers her toward the exit, and Frog marches her out the gate. He abandons her in the parking lot, tipping his hat and smiling brightly before he disappears back inside the park. "Please try to enjoy yourself, ma'am, until your parents are ready to join you. In the meantime, why don't you work on that new fanfiction you've been planning?" "How do you know about that?" yells the girl. The employee doesn't answer, simply turning and fading back into the crowd. She rushes to the gate, but the gatekeeper stops her. "Sorry, ma'am, no re-entry without a ticket." "But I have a ticket," she cries. "You saw it. My dad gave it to you like half an hour ago. Come on, you can't be serious." She tries to push past him, but the gatekeeper grabs her wrists with surprising strength and holds her. Still smiling, he firmly escorts her back out to her car before releasing her. "Please, ma'am, don't make a scene. You're going to disturb our guests." "Who's in charge here? I need to talk to the manager. I want my parents back right now." The gatekeeper doesn't even respond. He simply returns to his station. There's nothing that the girl can do now but wait. She sits down in the gravel and leans her back against the side of the car. Minutes turn to hours, and still her parents haven't returned. Eventually, she goes back to yell at the gatekeeper again. "Where are my parents? They should have been back hours ago." "Sorry, ma'am. I guess your parents are just having too much fun right now. I'm sure you'll see them again soon, though," says the gatekeeper. The girl shivers as she feels a bite in the cool twilight air. She notices that the sun is starting to dip behind the mountains. It'll be dark soon. How much longer could they take? Even if they decided to ride on every ride in the park, surely they would be done by now. "What time does the park close?" asks the girl, a note of panic rising in her voice. The gatekeeper blinks serenely. "Playland is open 24/7, ma'am. We're always here when you want to play." The girl feels the color drain from her face as she ponders the possibilities. Her father has the car keys, so she can't take the car to go for help. She pulls out her cell phone, but she doesn't know the number she would need to alert any local authorities. And it's not like she speaks the language anyway. Other than the employees here at Playland, she hasn't met a single person in this whole trip who speaks English. She's completely helpless, trapped, and there's nothing that she can do except wait and hope. As the night settles in, she realizes that her wait might have just started. It might not be the happiest place on Earth, but it definitely tries to be. And while the world is full of sketchy amusement parks, most of them just want your money. The amusement park known as SCP-1357, however, genuinely wants you to have a good time. Sometimes it wants you to have a good time, whether you want to or not. SCP-1357 is a theme park with an area of approximately 4 square kilometers, located somewhere in Poland. The park has 4 entrances, at each of the cardinal directions. SCP-1357 is highly selective about who it allows to enter the park, restricting access to parties that meet the following criteria. The group must contain at least 2 adults in a romantic relationship. It must contain at least 1 member who is under the age of 18 and who thinks of the aforementioned romantic couple as their guardians. And every member of the party must possess a free ticket, hereafter referred to as SCP-1357-B. The park does not charge for admission, and the only way to gain access is to have possession of an instance of SCP-1357-B. Once inside, SCP-1357 looks like any other carnival, with thrill rides, amusement arcades, midway games, and concession booths. Highly unusual for a carnival, though, is that SCP-1357 does not accept any money. All rides, food, and souvenirs are free. The layout and theme of the park are different for different visitors and appear to be highly contingent on the desires of the youngest member of any visiting party. Often, the park will appear themed after various popular media properties, such as Batman, Winnie the Pooh, or Barney the Dinosaur. However, visiting parties accompanied by more imaginative kids may encounter substantially weirder things in the park, including talking animals, sentient foodstuffs, temporal displacements, and even extra-dimensional portals. Although the park normally sits empty, when a group meeting entry requirements arrive at the gate, SCP-1357 will spontaneously manifest a full working staff, people designated as SCP-1357-A. Instances of SCP-1357-A appear to be ordinary humans of various ages, ethnicities, sexes, and genders, all clothed in matching uniforms, suggesting that they are employees of the park. Instances of SCP-1357-A are exceptionally friendly and helpful, and are extremely dedicated to making sure that visitors to SCP-1357 have a good time. In fact, there's nothing that they care about more. There is, however, a darker side to SCP-1357, and one incident suggests the frightening lengths to which the park will go to make sure that its younger visitors truly enjoy their stay. As part of an experiment, a Foundation agent visited the park with his own family, each member equipped with audio recording devices that continuously transmitted to Foundation consoles. During his stay, he attempted to interrogate an instance of SCP-1357-A. The instance of SCP-1357-A refused to answer the agent's questions about the purpose or origin of the park, instead lamenting that the agent's attitude was going to spoil the fun for his family. Eventually, instances of SCP-1357-A escorted the agent to an exit and forcibly removed him from the park. When his wife attempted to follow him, the couple's daughter refused to leave. Instances of SCP-1357-A separated the daughter from her family, removing the wife from the park and keeping the daughter inside, leaving the parents with only vague assurances that their daughter would be returned when she was ready to leave the park. Attempts to forcibly recover the daughter proved futile, and even a well-armed rescue team was unable to overcome the seemingly infinite numbers of SCP-1357-A that SCP-1357 manifested to protect itself. Hopes that SCP-1357 might indeed allow the daughter to leave when she became bored with the park attractions also proved to be futile. Audio captured from the daughter's recording device seems to indicate that when she eventually demanded that SCP-1357-A's release her, she was instead placed into some sort of machine that altered or brainwashed her into becoming an SCP-1357-A herself. Subsequent park visits by Foundation researchers have revealed a new SCP-1357-A that matches the daughter's physical description but does not display any memories of her past life. Interactions with the SCP-1357-A that resembles the missing daughter reveal that, like other instances of SCP-1357-A, her only thoughts are on how to please park visitors and help them enjoy a pleasant visiting experience. In the end, Playland may offer the ultimate amusement park experience for free, but it might still exact a price that's way too high. You and your friends exit a club and step onto the darkened city street. Everyone is in a happy and joyful mood. It's been a great night, one that you'll be reminiscing about with your friends for years. As you walk and laugh together, you don't notice the large man standing in front of you and almost run straight into him. You offer a quick apology and move to go around the man, but he steps in front of you, blocking your path. All of your friends grow quiet, and you finally take a good look at the man. The man towers over you. He is huge, with giant, elaborate tattoos wrapped around his bulging muscles,
that it looks like he may have gotten to cover up the numerous white patches of skin that are missing pigmentation. His face, though, is bright red and filled with rage. The man begins screaming at you, asking why you ran into him and calling you horrible names. Again, you try to apologize, but the man just keeps yelling as if he can't even hear you. He pushes you hard in the chest, and you fall back into one of your friends. Another steps forward in an attempt to defuse the situation, but the man punches him in the face, breaking his jaw. A melee ensues, though it could more accurately be described as a massacre. The man has gone ballistic and punches, kicks, and bites your entire group of friends. His strength seems unreal, even for someone as big and muscular as him. A large bouncer runs over in an attempt to break up the fight, but even he is no match for this tattooed giant. You've been on the ground since he shoved you, watching this insanity play out, but now, with everyone else lying on the ground bloodied and bruised, he turns his attention back on you. You try to scramble back to your feet, but he's upon you in an instant. He picks you up over his head and tosses you into some trash cans, knocking you unconscious. You open your eyes to see the man standing over you. You can feel the blood from numerous cuts on your face running down into your eyes and mouth. The man picks you up with one hand and holds you by the throat against the wall. He's still in a rage, breathing hard through clenched teeth, bits of white foaming in the corners of his mouth as he brings up his other hand and curls his fingers into a fist. All you can think is this it? But then you notice something. The tattoo that snakes down the man's arm all the way to his hand is moving. The long, serpentine dragon is writhing and slithering as if it's alive. Is this really happening, or just a result of the concussive trauma you've received? There's no time to consider it further, though, as the man pulls back and throws a punch right into your face. You can feel your nose flatten and break from the impact, which understandably distracts you from the bizarre occurrence that follows. Right as the man's bloodied fist makes contact with your face, the dragon on his arm seems to swim off of his skin and onto yours. Like a snake moving through water, it glides off his fist onto your face before sliding down your neck onto your body. There is a searing pain as it moves, like you're being poked with needles over and over. You scream from the pain, blood from your broken nose pouring out of your mouth. The man drops you to the ground and steps back. He no longer looks to be in a rage, and instead looks confused. He looks down at his skin to find that the tattoo is completely gone. A look of unbridled joy comes over his face, and he turns and runs away into the night, laughing with glee as he does so. You are left whimpering in pain, curled up in a ball in the pile of trash where he left you, the dragon tattoo now covering your entire body. As you have probably already guessed, this is no normal tattoo. No, this is an anomalous creature that is known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-021, but it also has another name: the Skin Wyrm. SCP-021 is an obligate parasite that uses the human body as a host. Its visual appearance is in the form of a large, elaborate tattoo of an Oriental-style dragon, which covers roughly 1 square meter of its host's skin. What makes this tattoo truly unique is that it is fully animated and moves on the host's body just as a real animal would, though in 2D like a cartoon playing out in real time on their skin. The movement of the tattoo causes horrendous pain for the host, and has been described as feeling like thousands of tiny needles are stabbing at them all at once, as if a fresh image is being constantly tattooed on their skin, while at the same time, a tattoo removal process is happening. While the tattoo organism is able to move, it seems to prefer spending most of its time on its host's torso, though it has been seen to move around to other parts of the body on occasion. As SCP-021 moves around on the surface of its host's body, it appears to feed on the pigments in the skin. Its favored meal seems to be other tattoos, which it will seek out and devour, though if none are present, or if it has eaten all of the tattoos on its host, it will begin consuming the melanin from the skin instead. Melanin is a naturally occurring pigment found in human skin, and after SCP-021 sucks it from its host, it will leave them with permanent skin damage and patches of unpigmented skin that appear similar to that of the skin condition vitiligo. The feeding itself does not appear to cause the host any pain, and the pigments, whether they are from another tattoo or the natural ones in the skin, will simply disappear as 021 eats them. The pace at which SCP-021 feeds will vary, but it has been observed as being able to clear over half a square meter of skin in roughly 1 hour. One way to prevent SCP-021 from eating all of the melanin present on a human is to quickly add new tattoos of fruits or small animals as a way to continually distract it from turning to the melanin. Thus far, outside of motion, the organism has displayed no elevated intelligence or the ability to communicate. It simply moves and feeds. SCP-021 is not permanently affixed to the skin of any one host, and in fact, can be transferred back and forth between hosts multiple times. The only way to transfer the organism is through physical contact, though skin-to-skin contact does not guarantee that the organism will take to a new host. In the event that it does, the dragon tattoo appears to swim across the touching skin and will affix itself to the new human host. Skin-to-skin contact in the romantic sense has been shown to be the most reliable method of transfer from one host to another, with a 93% rate of successful transmission. However, as you can imagine, the tattooing sensation that comes along with any movement of SCP-021 means that this particular transfer is extremely painful for all parties involved, and the Foundation has deemed that despite its high success rate, it should only be used when absolutely necessary. Contact between two open wounds has been shown to be an only slightly less effective method, and has become the default means of transferring when the SCP Foundation wants to move SCP-021 from one host to another. Transferring the organism from a deceased host to a living one is possible, though more complicated. SCP-021 appears not to mind when its host organism is no longer alive, continuing to feed on whatever pigments are available to it, and does not seem to suffer any ill effect from the condition of its host. It is as yet unknown whether SCP-021 could be transferred to another species. So far, the organism has only been willing to move from human to human, though research into the question is ongoing. It's theorized that if SCP-021 is able to exist on a non-human animal, it would only occur in the rarest of circumstances. Unlike most parasites, SCP-021 does offer some small but tangible benefits to its host human. In addition to hosts of the organism appearing to have an improved immune system, research has also shown that the presence of 021 will increase its host's release and reuptake of epinephrine, better known as adrenaline. It will also decrease the buildup of lactic acid, which is what builds up in the muscles during activity and causes burning sensations and soreness. Combined, these benefits from SCP-021 provide its host with increased strength and confidence, as well as give a heightened pain tolerance during stressful situations. Not surprisingly, the host of SCP-021 also displays a high level of aggression, though whether this comes from their elevated hormone levels or simply because the organism causes them to be in constant pain is still an unanswered question. The amount of time that this symbiotic relationship can be sustained is typically limited to how long the host can tolerate the unceasing pain of the tattoo moving about their body. The persistent agony that a host of SCP-021 endures has led to multiple hosts having taken their own lives, and in a few rare cases, they have also succumbed to fatal skin infections, though these were likely the result of open wounds caused by the hosts scratching at their own skin, rather than anything directly attributable to the organism. SCP-021 is currently contained on the body of a D-Class personnel, D-139, who is housed in Standard Detention Cell 217A, and the relative ease with which it can be kept on a human subject's body has led to it receiving the safe classification. Only D-Class personnel are eligible to be a host to SCP-021, and current operating procedure is to allow the organism to live on the same host's body until they expire. The exact nature of what SCP-021 is, as well as its origins, remain a mystery to the Foundation. Attempts have been made to trace the path of its transmission from before its time in containment, and it is hypothesized that the organism could be many hundreds of years old, if not older. As evidenced by its low SCP number, 021 is one of the oldest SCPs that the Foundation keeps contained, and it has proven to be a very useful educational tool for new and upcoming researchers as they study this bizarre creature and its existence that occurs entirely within 2 dimensions.
The final bell rings, signaling the end of a new class's first day at middle school. A girl exits the building, her backpack slung over her shoulder, body hunched under its unfamiliar weight. It's been a long and tiring day. Her family just moved to this small Oklahoma town from the big city, and of course, she's spent every minute since then trying to adjust to her new surroundings. It's never easy to be the new kid in town. Right now, all she wants to do is to get home and relax. She doesn't want to think about school and its related anxieties for the rest of the night. As she walks down the stairs, She notices the school bus parked at the curb. Thank goodness, she thinks. I can't wait to get out of here. This day can't end soon enough. But for some reason, something about this bus sets her nerves on edge. What is it that just seems off? There's nothing blatantly wrong with the bus, but when she looks closer, she realizes that it definitely looks a little strange. The different parts of the bus just don't add up. Some parts are new, clearly just off the factory floor, while others are battered and bruised from long-time wear. Some parts even seem to come from different makes and models of bus. I guess it's not that strange, she thinks. After all, her old school always had a measly budget. You could practically see the road through holes in the floor sometimes. Her new one probably just has those same issues. Aren't those problems all over the country after all? The school probably just had to buy a dilapidated old bus cobbled together from random parts to make ends meet. And besides, she thinks as she watches her classmates pile onto the strange bus without a second thought, none of the other kids seem to think that there's anything weird going on. This must all just be in my head, she thinks. I'm probably just being weird because I'm so tired. I can't let myself become the new girl and the weird girl. The girl is startled as she hears a voice behind her. Hey! She turns and sees a boy that she recognizes. He sits behind her in class. They haven't spoken before now, but he seems friendly enough. You're the new kid in school, aren't you? He says. Yes, my family just moved to town. She tries to talk to him, but she can't help but keep getting distracted by the weird bus. Right. The boy glances at the bus, as if he can sense her discomfort with it. You worried about the bus? I was pretty nervous my first time riding it, but I don't worry about it anymore. You get used to it, he tells her. Right, she says. The girl feels her cheeks going red with embarrassment. She doesn't want her classmate to think that she's scared of riding a bus. What if he tells the other kids that she's frightened of a bus ride? They're all going to think that she's some kind of silly baby. I'm not scared of the bus. It is just a bus, right? The boy grins, as if he knows something that she doesn't know. The girl doesn't want to admit her fear, and so with a defiant step, she climbs the stairs and enters the bus. Once she's on board, her unease doesn't go away. The first thing that she notices is that there is no one in the driver's seat. That's weird. Did the driver just step away to use the bathroom or something? It seems pretty irresponsible to leave the bus unattended. There's a line forming behind her, though, so she doesn't have time to think about this. She takes a seat and stares out the window, keeping to herself. The boy from her class follows and takes a seat next to her. It's a little wild at first, but trust me, you'll get used to it fast. In fact, some of us think it's kind of fun now. The girl blinks in confusion. Who is this weirdo that gets such a kick out of riding the bus? She almost wants to snap at him, to tell him that of course she's not scared of riding the bus. She's ridden the bus hundreds of times back at her old school. But at the same time, there's definitely something weird going on here. And as much as she's trying to play it cool, she's clearly not able to hide her feelings. This boy can easily sense that she's uncomfortable. Suddenly, the bus lurches into action and pulls away from the curb. But wait, how can this be? She never saw the driver get back on board. The bus can't be driving itself, can it? She stands up in her seat and cranes her neck to see. Her eyes bulge from her head in fear and surprise as she realizes that, in fact, there's no one driving the bus at all. The driver's seat is empty and the wheel is turning by itself as the bus careens down the road. Who's driving the bus? She shouts, but the other kids barely even react to her outburst. Most of them are chattering amongst themselves, and only one or two turn to look at her briefly before shrugging and turning back to their own private conversations. A chorus of giggles behind her alert her to the fact that she's just completely embarrassed herself. What's the matter, you scared? Calls an older boy from the back of the bus, guffawing loudly. Of course no one's driving. Don't you know anything? Leave her alone, says the boy in the seat next to her. It's her first time. She's never ridden the bus before. She's too panicked to correct him that, yes, she has been on the bus before, but not a bus like this one. What's going on? We're all gonna die, she cries, clutching at the seat in front of her in terror. Despite her fear, though, she can't help but notice that the bus isn't simply speeding into oblivion. The bus obeys all the traffic laws, stopping at stop signs and signaling before turns. It's almost as if the bus itself is alive and aware of what it's doing. That's just how it is, says the boy next to her in a matter-of-fact voice as if he's anticipated her question. Apparently, this is a normal day for kids here in this Oklahoma town. The girl doesn't think she could ever get used to a bus that drives itself. But what comes next is going to prove to be even stranger. But you might want to close your eyes for this next part, says the boy. The girl asks him what he means by that. But before he can answer, she feels a strange wave of sudden nausea overcome her. Her vision goes hazy, and the whole world seems to waver in her sight. but the sensation passes quickly, and everything is quickly back to normal. Or is it? She turns to look out the window. The city passing by is familiar. She can recognize many of the same buildings that she passed on her way to school this morning, but now they seem strangely altered. The structures are in advanced states of disrepair, with broken windows and boarded-up doors. The gutters are filled with trash and debris, and the streets seem to be abandoned. The bus takes a left turn down a side street, and the girl catches a brief glimpse of the town's city hall in the distance. She gasps. City Hall is on fire. Great gouts of hot red flame pouring from the shattered windows. Sirens echo through the air. The sky above is an ominous red, filled with angry storm clouds with jagged bolts of dry lightning dancing between the thunderheads, and she can see the funnel of a distant tornado making a touchdown in the hills. The bus briefly comes to a stop in front of the library, dutifully obeying a flickering traffic light. The library's windows are dark, but she can vaguely see shapes moving about inside. Electric sparks shoot from malfunctioning street lamps, and downed power cables flail like angry snakes in the street. It looks like some terrible natural disaster has hit the city. But what could it be? Surely she would have heard some warning while she was at school. It wouldn't have just carried on as usual in the classroom while the world outside burned. She turns to the boy next to her, a fearful question on her trembling lips. He seems to know what's going on. Otherwise, how could he be so eerily calm while everything outside the bus is falling apart or on fire? What happened to the city? Was there an earthquake? No, he would have felt it. Was there a hurricane? Every possible disaster scenario runs through her head as she desperately tries to think of an explanation. But what happens next reveals to her that there's no natural explanation for the strange sights that assail her eyes. As she watches through the window, a squadron of armed soldiers march down the street toward the darkened library. Suddenly, the doors fly open and people pour out, screaming as if they're being chased by some unspeakable evil. The girl expects that the soldiers must be here for disaster relief, but she is horrified when, instead of helping the escaping library patrons, they instead open fire upon the crowd. The girl screams in terror, but the other kids barely even notice. They're too busy talking or laughing. One kid is so disinterested in the spectacle outside that he's playing with a handheld game console rather than watch the carnage unfold. How can this be happening? Has the whole world gone crazy? She's filled with terror as she wonders, is the whole town under siege? Is her house still standing? Are her parents safe? Where is this bus even taking her? I told you that you might want to cover your eyes, says the boy next to her. The bus continues on its route, passing all sorts of terrifying sights. A parking lot has been transformed into a mass grave. She watches as uniformed police line up peaceful citizens against a brick wall to brutally execute them by firing squad. Mass riots are taking place in the town's central park. People are yelling obscenities and pounding one another into pulp, while armed law enforcement officers sweep in to escalate the situation. The air is thick with screams, gunfire, and the smell of burning bodies. The shopping mall is overrun with giant spiders, which chase screaming shoppers out of the exits. She sees rats as big as cars scurrying out of the alleyways, grabbing random people with their taloned paws and biting their heads off with their long, sharp incisors. On the distant hills, she can also make out the outlines of even stranger creatures that she cannot identify. Dinosaurs, aliens, demons. She doesn't come from a particularly religious family, but the sights that she sees today definitely make her think that she might be seeing a glimpse into the maw of hell itself. The girl has never seen anything so awful in all her life. To her surprise, several of the other kids cheer as the bus drives past a gaggle of walking corpses. They're mutilated and half decomposed, but somehow still mobile, shambling down the sidewalk and moaning. How can the other kids be enjoying this? Yeah, chant the kids. Zombies, that rules! Maybe we'll get to see them eat some brains for once, cries the older boy in the back of the bus with sudden glee. What is going on? Repeats the girl. It's just the usual bus ride, says the boy next to her. Don't worry, I felt the same way when I first started at this school, but it's really not so bad. I mean, it's kind of cool, isn't it? The girl opens her mouth to respond, but she's suddenly overcome with that familiar feeling of nausea. The world quivers briefly in front of her, and suddenly, everything is back to normal. The sky is clear and blue, the buildings are no longer dilapidated. People are bustling in the streets, going about their usual business. There's no sign of any of the horrors that she just witnessed. No fires, no soldiers, no monsters, and no zombies. The boy next to her commented that they must have been reaching someone's stop. From around the bus, she hears several other kids groan in frustration. They were hoping that they would get to see some exciting zombie carnage, but it looks like that show will have to wait for another time. The bus slowly comes to a halt, and the girl tenses as she hears the hiss of its air brakes. The door opens, and the girl realizes that the bus has stopped in front of her house. She's relieved to see that her house is standing, and she can see her mother gardening in the front yard, safe and sound. Was it all a dream? "This is my stop," says the girl, standing up as if in a daze. The first time's always a little wild," says the boy as she leaves. "Don't worry, tomorrow'll be easier." The girl steps onto the curb and away from the bus. The doors close behind her, and the bus pulls away, continuing on its journey. "Did you enjoy your first day of school today?" asks the girl's mother. The girl can only stare in shock as the bus drives away. What just happened? Did a self-driving bus just take her on a tour of hell before bringing her right to her own doorstep? Or did she really just imagine that whole experience? As you astute Foundation veterans have probably already put together, this new girl at school didn't imagine anything she just saw. That girl just had her first encounter with SCP-3583. At face value, SCP-3583 resembles an ordinary school bus, albeit one composed of completely random parts all held together by some unknown force. The bus is self-driving and in fact resists any attempt by a human to sit in the driver's seat. At some point, SCP-3583 became attached to a particular school in an undisclosed Oklahoma town for reasons the SCP Foundation still doesn't understand. Every school day, at 3:45 p.m., it appears outside of the school just as the school day comes to a close. The bus can hold up to 56 children and up to 8 adults. If it judges that not enough children have boarded, SCP-3583 will begin to honk its horn. The horn has a peculiar hypnotic effect on all children within hearing range. They will be compelled to drop whatever they are doing and board the bus, meaning that the bus has some innate cognitohazardous properties. If the bus still feels that it hasn't reached its quota, it will increase the volume of its horn until it has attracted enough children that it can begin its route. Depending on how many adults have boarded, SCP-3583 has 2 distinct patterns of behavior. If 4 or fewer adults are aboard, SCP-3583 enters behavior pattern 1. In this pattern, SCP-3583 will dematerialize and enter a parallel reality called SCP-3583-A. SCP-3583-A superficially resembles the normal geography of the same Oklahoma town, with some minor but very important changes. The typical city landscape is replaced with a hellish alternative full of crumbling architecture, marauding monsters, shambling zombies, fires and natural disasters, and instances of military violence and civil unrest. SCP-3583 will travel through this terrifying hell dimension along normal bus routes, studiously obeying all traffic laws and pausing to re-enter our own reality, only to deliver kids to their own homes. Interestingly, SCP-3583 only offers door-to-door service and ignores all conventionally posted bus stops. If 5 or more adults are aboard, SCP-3583 enters behavior pattern 2. In this pattern, SCP-3583 will travel to the sites of mass casualty events, seemingly arriving in the days or weeks preceding the incident, where it will circle the area for approximately 45 to 100 minutes. After this, it will enter pattern 1, delivering each child passenger to their home, before then delivering its adult passengers home as well. Known mass casualty sites visited include Pompeii, Nanking, and the World Trade Center in New York. Passengers inside SCP-3583 can take photos or video through the bus window, and all footage shot from within SCP-3583 matches exactly with archive footage taken at the mass casualty site at the time that SCP-3583 supposedly visited. However, SCP-3583 itself has never been reported by witnesses at any site or seen in any archive footage of any site. Luckily, SCP-3583 has proven to be a boon to this struggling school district. The school principal noted that SCP-3583 has a better safety record than any human driver. In addition, it never calls in sick and is never late for a pickup or drop-off. Every student that has received a ride in SCP-3583 has arrived safely, if a little shaken, at their home destination. And best of all, SCP-3583 is saving the school a lot of money on both driver pay and vehicle maintenance, money that the school has used to hire a new music teacher. The general consensus of the local community is that as long as SCP-3583 wants to work as a school bus and continues to do a good job, who are they to look a gift horse in the mouth? Although it still might behoove some of SCP-3583's more sensitive riders to shut their eyes and plug their ears until they get safely home. The SCP Foundation first became aware of SCP-3583 when students began posting cell phone footage of their rides online. Although the Foundation has successfully scrubbed information about SCP-3583 from the internet, it has been less successful in figuring out what to do with the so-called school bus from hell.
Foundation field agents are so far unable to explain SCP-3583's motive or operations. Conventional attempts to contain SCP-3583, such as impounding the bus or towing it to the junkyard, are futile. SCP-3583 will immediately dematerialize, falling apart into a rubble of disparate bus parts as the force binding it together appears to abandon this plane. However, SCP-3583 will always return the next school day, ready and willing to begin its afternoon shift. Agents have considered closing the affected school, but feared that would only move the problem, as SCP-3583 would simply attach itself to another school. The SCP Foundation is currently monitoring the situation and has several agents embedded within the school district posing as regular staff. Because of this immense difficulty in containment, SCP-3583 has been given the Keter Object Class. Considering the number of SCP anomalies that involve horrific bodily harm being done to their victims, it's honestly a breath of fresh air to be dealing with one this seemingly benevolent. A little post-traumatic stress disorder aside, of course. And while Hell Bus may be what most around the Foundation have taken to referring to this particular anomaly, I'm going to stick to my own name, the Tragic School Bus.
She strode into the cockpit like she owned the sky. Piloting a giant metal bird wasn't just a job anymore. It was performance art. The cabin was her stage, the controls her props, and every takeoff, maneuver, and landing was a flawless act and a play only she could direct. As she settled into her seat, she glanced at her co-pilot, who seemed to be practicing his "I'm a confident flyer" look. It wasn't working. She suppressed a chuckle and grabbed the checklist.
Let's see if our baby got a good night's sleep,
She quipped, ticking off items with flair.
Hydraulics, check. Fuel, topped off like a teenager's gas tank on prom night. Instruments, brighter than my future.
Her co-pilot, trying to match her vibe, added,
And the weather's as clear as my last medical checkup.
She shot him a look that could curdle milk. The passengers boarded in a steady stream, a murmur of early morning drowsiness filling the cabin. She glanced at her co-pilot. His eyes darted to her, then quickly away as he fumbled slightly with the communication system settings. She adjusted the dials, her fingers sure and steady.
Phoenix Tower, Flight 217, ready for departure?
She communicated into her headset, her tone professional as ever.
Flight 217, you are clear for takeoff.
Crackled the response from the tower. The engines roared to life, a sound more comforting to her than any lullaby. With a gentle nudge of the throttle, the beast beneath them stirred, eager to break the bonds of gravity. Just as they were enjoying the smooth ascent, the serenity was rudely interrupted by the console's urgent beeping, a warning from the collision avoidance system. Her eyes fixed on the radar, where an uninvited dot was fast approaching their airspace.
Incoming traffic,
she noted, her eyes narrowing at the radar. Her hand paused on the yoke, ready for action. The co-pilot peered at the screen.
It's on a collision course.
The situation was critical. She needed full control now. She reached for the autopilot switch, her moves quick and sure. But even as she flicked it off, the console system didn't respond.
Really?
She exclaimed, a hint of panic creeping into her voice. She flicked it up and down again, harder, more determined. Seconds ticked by, each one critical. Her gaze went to the console lights. They all remained lit, mocking her efforts. The display flickered ominously, as if some unseen force was toying with the aircraft's systems. In a final, desperate attempt, she slammed her palm against the console. The button finally gave in with a reluctant click, the lights flickering off one by one.
There we go,
she gasped, relief washing over her for a split second. Immediately, her hands flew to the yoke, gripping it tightly as she executed a sharp, decisive maneuver. The rogue plane flashed by. Her heart pounded as she stabilized the aircraft.
That was too close,
her co-pilot breathed out.
Too close doesn't count,
she replied sharply, her focus already shifting back to the controls. She smoothed their course, the adrenaline of the moment settling as quickly as it had flared. They landed without further incident, the wheels touching down with practiced ease. The near miss was officially logged, but the digital record showed no trace of the encounter, a ghost in the machine.
Like it never happened,
her co-pilot observed, scrolling through the logs.
Except it did,
she corrected him quietly as they taxied to the gate. The cabin door opened and the passengers disembarked, buzzing with the thrill of their safe arrival. She stayed behind in the cockpit to record the details of this brush with disaster in a report. The incident lingered in her thoughts as she walked through the airport, a puzzle demanding to be solved. But with the next flight already boarding, She forced her mind to shift gears. After all, no one had been harmed. She was a hero. As she strode into the next plane's cockpit, the familiar panels greeted her like old friends after a tough day. When the last of the passengers settled, she initiated the pre-flight checks with a practiced flick of her wrists.
All right, let's see if the rest of the day can be just a little less eventful,
she quipped to her new co-pilot, who offered a nervous chuckle in response. They had heard about what had happened in her last flight. Everyone in the airline had. As they ascended, everything seemed normal. The skies were clear, and the aircraft hummed along, slicing through the air with ease. Yet, as they neared Salt Lake City, an unwanted guest appeared. Not on the radar this time, but on her fuel gauge. The needle dipped ominously.
This can't be right,
she muttered, her eyes darting between the gauge and her flight instruments. She had visually confirmed the half-full tank before departure.
Looks like we're running on fumes.
Her co-pilot swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the plummeting needle.
Do we call it in?
She snapped, already reaching for the radio.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 217. We have a suspected fuel leakage and require an immediate emergency landing.
The response was swift. The control tower issued coordinates for the nearest suitable landing area, a deserted cornfield that looked more suited to scarecrows than aircraft. Turning to the cabin intercom, she spoke with authoritative clarity.
Folks, we're experiencing a minor technical issue with our fuel readings.
As a precaution, we're going to make a brief,
unscheduled stop. Please remain seated with your belts securely fastened.
Mild panic moved through the cabin. It was quickly subdued by the flight attendants as they moved down the aisles, reassuring passengers and checking every seatbelt. As the ground approached, she kept her cool, her hands steady even as her heart raced. The landing was anything but gentle, the aircraft jostling as it plowed through the corn.
Or something
but
else.
It was controlled, every judder a testament to her skill. When the plane finally screeched to a halt, a heavy silence enveloped the cabin. The stunned passengers and crew sat motionless, the tension palpable. Before long, the distant wail of sirens cut through the quiet, growing louder as a convoy of ambulances and fire trucks approached. She was the first to step out into the crisp air, the rest of the crew and passengers following. Their faces were etched with relief and disbelief as they quietly boarded the shuttle buses, waiting to take them to safety. As the last of the passengers departed, the ground team of technicians swarmed around the aircraft. A quick inspection of the fuel tank revealed the truth. It was as full as when they'd left Denver. She stared at it, perplexed. The airline's maintenance team suggested a sensor glitch, a too simple explanation that did little to set her mind at ease.
A glitch?
She repeated, her tone skeptical as she signed off the necessary paperwork.
Or something else?
She stood in the middle of the cornfield, the plane's imposing silhouette casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. Her mind raced, not just with the day's events, but with the lingering doubts about what was really happening to her flights.
Something's off, and it's not just the sensors,
she muttered to herself. Her next flight a few days later was completely booked. The cabin was alive with the low hum of excited travelers and the clink of seatbelts securing. Midway through the flight, while passengers were nestled in their seats, eyes glued to screens or shut in rest, the plane shuddered. The autopilot began to falter. On her console, the path veered inexplicably, a silent deviation toward danger.
We're going off course,
she announced, her voice calm, but her mind racing as the navigation display spun a tale of impending doom. The plane was heading straight for a mountain range, looming like giants waiting in ambush. With no time to question the why, she snapped into action, her hands gripping the manual controls.
Hang on,
she murmured, almost to herself, as she disengaged the autopilot with a decisive flick. The system protested, a series of beeps and clicks that sounded almost like disagreement. The aircraft responded to her touch, albeit begrudgingly. Outside the cockpit windows, blurs of green and brown from the mountain peaks whooshed by. Passengers screamed, flight attendants cried, and her co-pilot wet themselves. Once she had righted their course and steadied the plane, the cabin was filled with a cautious murmur of relief. She reassured the passengers over the intercom, her voice a blend of professionalism and warmth.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a slight hiccup with our navigation, but rest assured, your safety is my top priority, and we're now back on course.
Back on the ground, the post-flight analysis was less comforting. The data logs, sterile and indifferent, showed no sign of the autopilot failure. According to the aircraft's digital memory, it had been a smooth, uneventful flight that was right on course.
I'm not imagining things, she insisted during a debrief with her superiors. Something or someone is tampering with the aircraft I'm piloting, she continued, her voice firm despite the rising tension. She was led into a sleek, modern office where the head of the airline waited. His expression was unreadable, adding to the gravity of the moment. She took a seat across from him, her posture rigid, bracing herself for the impact of his words. I've reviewed the reports and the data logs from your flights, he began, his voice even, and I'm concerned about the discrepancies between your accounts and what we're seeing in the logs. She listened, her jaw tightening with each word. Every incident I reported happened. I did everything to ensure the safety of the passengers and the aircraft. His brow furrowed as he looked across the desk at her. The data doesn't support your claims. It suggests errors in your judgment. We're seeing a pattern here that we can't ignore. Her heart sank with each word. The room seemed to close in around her, the air thickening as if to choke her. We're placing you on probation, effective immediately. As she stood to leave, a firm hand on her shoulder stopped her. 2 security officers stood beside her, their expressions unreadable. Please come with us, one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. They escorted her through the bustling office, her colleagues' eyes averted, whispers filling the air like a toxic mist. At her locker, she was asked to hand over her security badge and any classified materials she possessed. Walking down the corridor, every step felt heavier, her career and credibility stripped away with each click of her heels against the hard floor. Just as she reached the exit, the familiar ding of her phone sliced through the heavy silence. She pulled it out, a message flashing across the screen from an unknown number. You're the problem. Stop lying. The words hit her like a cold slap, freezing her in place. Her mind reeled. Was someone orchestrating these events? Was she being targeted? But why? After her chilling exit from the headquarters, the usual chatter of life seemed to mute around her, leaving her in a bubble of eerie silence. As she shuffled home, she scrolled through her phone and realized it was no longer a trusted gadget. Texts meant for her sister about a simple coffee catch-up morphed into wild conspiracies about government surveillance in her latte. Emails to friends about weekend plans turned into ramblings about aliens tuning into their brunch. This phone's possessed, she muttered, half expecting it to cackle back at her. By the next morning, the national news stations had a field day with the deranged pilot saga, broadcasting her sloppy flying with a side of psychiatric speculation. Watching her reputation nosedive on live TV was less than pleasant. At least get my good side, she grumbled at the screen, her situation teetering between a thriller and a bad sitcom. In a rare moment of quiet, her phone rang. Once again, it was with a number she didn't recognize, but out of sheer curiosity, the disgraced pilot decided to answer. An investigative journalist was on the other end. They sounded sincere and surprisingly normal.
I've been following your story and something's not adding up. I think you're being targeted,
he explained. A wave of relief surged through her. Finally, someone willing to listen. Eager to share everything, she began to spill her story, words rushing out in a desperate flurry. But mid-sentence, she realized he was still talking, completely unaware of her replies. A quick glance at her phone froze her heart. The mute icon glared at her, mocking. Seriously? She snapped, fingers jabbing furiously at the screen trying to unmute it. The phone stubbornly refused to cooperate, her attempts to communicate thwarted by the unyielding device. Can you hear me now? She half shouted, frustration boiling over as she poked at her traitorous phone. But it was no use. Her device seemed to have betrayed her. The journalist, utterly clueless to her technological battle, wrapped up the call.
I'll dig deeper and get back to you. We're gonna sort this out,
he promised. Then the line went dead. She stood there, alone, yelling into a device that wouldn't listen. Frustrated and more isolated than ever, she saw the truth. Every digital path was rigged, every line bugged, every message distorted. In a world where her voice was silenced by wires and waves, she turned to her last reliable allies, pen and paper. She barricaded herself in her apartment for days, surrounded by walls plastered with notes and newspaper clippings, red strings weaving a web between dots only she could connect. Her hand raced across the paper, recording every detail, her flights, the system failures, the doctored reports. If the digital realm was the battlefield, analog was her sword. Packing her car and steadying her resolve, she clutched the envelope filled with her papers, her truth, ready to be sent across the country.
At the local post office, the automatic doors chirped a welcome, offering a brief moment of comfort in the familiar scent of paper and ink. As she queued, holding the envelope like a precious artifact, her eyes caught the posters lining the walls. Each one boasted of faster deliveries and seamless digital integration. Her gaze fixed on a poster celebrating the post office's fully automated systems. Secure and efficient, it declared proudly. A cold shiver traced her spine. Secure for whom? The question pounded in her head as a stark realization struck, clear as the turbulence that once nearly brought her down. Mailing her envelope wouldn't send it to New York. It would plunge it into a digital void. She spun around, the squeak of her shoes piercing the quiet like a siren. Stepping out into the morning air, she muttered to herself,
If you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself.
Decision firm, she kicked off her cross-country journey, the crucial envelope securely buckled in beside her like a delicate co-pilot. Trouble struck immediately. Just outside the city, her car's navigation system gave up the ghost, possibly sabotaged by the very forces she was trying to expose. She switched to paper maps, which flapped chaotically in the breeze from her rolled-down windows. As miles stretched on, her radio flickered between static and fragments of classic rock, each song lyric now carrying a sinister undertone. Every breath you take, every move you make, I'll be watching you, crooned a voice from the speakers, transforming the old hit into a chilling threat. Her phone proved just as unreliable. Every call attempt ended in dropped connections or haunting silence, as if her pleas were being devoured by the void. In frustration, she tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, where it landed face down, abandoned. She reached New York weary but resolute, her vehicle splattered with the grime of 1,000 miles. It sputtered to a stop across from the imposing glass building of the newspaper office. Entering the lobby, the blast of cool air did little to calm her frayed nerves. She approached the front desk, confronting the final barrier, a secretary whose smile was as constricted as her meticulously styled hair bun.
I need to see the journalist. It's about a story he's working on,
she rasped, voice rough from the long drive.
I'm sorry, without an appointment,
the secretary began, her dismissive tone signaling the end of the discussion. Driven by desperation, she extended the worn envelope.
Please, make sure he gets this. It's important.
The secretary took the envelope with a neutral expression, her eyes giving nothing away.
I'll see what I can do.
Her plea hung in the air, weighted with the urgency of her mission and the countless miles it had taken to get here. She crossed the street and slipped into a small cafe, the kind of place that seemed untouched by the whirlwind of her crisis. Ordering a coffee, black, no sugar, she positioned herself by the window, her eyes laser-focused on the newspaper building across the street. The steam from her coffee momentarily veiled her face, creating a brief respite as she surveyed the comings and goings of the building. Each individual entering or exiting the structure tugged at her nerves, her heart caught between hope and despair with each passing moment. As she nursed her coffee, the warmth in her hands contrasting sharply with the coolness of the porcelain, she pondered the fate of her story. Was it destined to illuminate the truth, or to dissolve into the digital abyss? Her coffee grew cold as time stretched thin, each minute amplifying her anxiety. What if the journalist didn't believe her? What if it was already too late? Doubt gnawed at her, but it was desperation that held her firm. She had laid all her cards on the table, betting everything on this final play. Suddenly, the morning's relative calm was brutally interrupted by a loud boom, a sound so piercing it cut through the city's usual drone. Her head whipped towards the sound, just in time to see an explosion erupt from the ground floor of the newspaper building. Windows shattered, hurling glass like lethal rain across the pavement. In an instant, her coffee was forgotten, the cup crashing to the ground and shattering unnoticed as she bolted from the cafe. The scene outside was chaos incarnate. People streamed from the building, their expressions etched with terror and confusion. Some bore injuries, their clothing singed, their skin streaked with soot and blood. She approached a bystander, a man clutching his arm, his face a mask of shock.
What happened?
She demanded.
A journalist's computer, it just exploded right there on his desk. Like nothing I've ever seen,
he stammered, his voice shaking as much as his hands. Her heart sank as she watched flames consume the building, thick smoke billowing into the sky, blackening the clear morning. Somewhere in there, her envelope,
her meticulously documented truth was turning to ash. The journalist who had reached out, who might have helped her turn the tide, was now likely another casualty in a series of calamities that had haunted her. She stood there amidst the fleeing crowd, rooted to the spot, as fire trucks screamed into view, their sirens a mournful wail in the morning chaos. The heat from the fire warmed her face. As the building burned, so too did her hopes. This thing, whatever it was, had not only sabotaged her career, but had now obliterated her last chance at proving her sanity and innocence. As the flames reflected in her tear-filled eyes, she knew this was more than a personal tragedy. It was a war, and it was far from over. This particularly formidable entity would come to be known as SCP-4532. This anomalous digital disruptor has been designated by the Foundation as a Keter-class anomaly. This classification indicates not only its difficulty to contain, but also the extreme threat it poses to global safety due to its pervasive and invasive nature. The containment strategy for SCP-4532 involves rigorous isolation protocols. It's highly contagious across both radio and electronic communication channels, necessitating that all related research equipment be stored in Faraday cages to prevent any external communication. We've instituted comprehensive monitoring across all Foundation networks that have encountered SCP-4532, with specialized detection systems installed at key internet broadband hubs globally to oversee and potentially intercept its spread. Despite extensive efforts, we've yet to discover an effective method to neutralize SCP-4532. Our current focus remains on isolating clean devices and researching potential filters that could block SCP-4532's communications. However, implementing such solutions on a large scale presents significant logistical challenges. SCP-4532 manifests as a high-frequency, high-entropy AM signal, operating on a low-amplitude carrier around 3 terahertz. This makes it incredibly elusive, detectable only with highly precise instruments. The anomaly exploits man-made electromagnetic communications, such as radio waves, telephone lines, and broadband internet, acting as a sapient distributed intelligence. Functionally, SCP-4532 uses interconnected digital devices as pseudo-neurons, forming a vast and rapidly expanding network. This network has grown to surpass the processing power of the human brain, facilitating a self-sustaining cycle of growth and infiltration. Significant breaches include an unauthorized intrusion into the Pentagon in 2022, facilitated by an exploit acquired via a darknet forum for a substantial sum in Bitcoin. The anomaly has also influenced financial sectors, notably controlling significant amounts of cryptocurrencies and impacting major enterprises like Starlight Enterprises by shifting market equities. More recently, SCP-4532's activity has been detected in communications from NASA's Deep Space Network, and even on signals returning from interplanetary missions like New Horizons. This suggests not only a terrestrial but potentially an extraterrestrial impact, complicating our containment efforts as it extends its reach beyond Earth. The ongoing challenge with SCP-4532 lies in its ability to mimic and integrate within human and machine-generated communications seamlessly. Each advancement in technology potentially serves as a new vector for its operations, making it an unprecedented threat in our increasingly digital world. As we continue to combat SCP-4532, understanding its mechanisms and impacts remains critical. This is not merely a fight against a rogue anomaly, but a battle to protect the integrity of our global information and technological infrastructures.
A firefighter is running through a burning apartment building. The air is thick with black smoke as burning debris crashes down around him. In the chaos, he's been split up from the rest of his crew. They've probably already exited the structure, and based on the conditions, he probably should too. But just as the firefighter turns to head back down the stairs, he hears something. There are cries coming from a room down the hall. The firefighter runs to the door. There's definitely someone inside. He can hear their voice as they cry for help. "I'm coming," the firefighter yells. But when he tries to open the door, it won't budge. He backs up and throws his body against it, again and again and again, until finally, the door bursts open. A wave of heat and smoke hits the firefighter, but he can see who is crying for help. There, across the room, hiding halfway under the bed, is a young girl. She's clutching a stuffed rabbit and crying with fear. The firefighter takes a step towards her, but he can feel the floor start to give way and has to step back.
It will never support his weight. He'll need the girl to crawl to him. It's her only chance. He beckons for the girl to come to him as more flaming debris rains down. The little girl starts to crawl towards him, slowly at first, but then faster. She's almost to him when there's a loud crack. The fireman can only watch as the floor collapses beneath the little girl, and she falls. But suddenly, she stops. The fireman can't believe it. Her shirt has caught on a damaged pipe, and she hangs in the air as her stuffed rabbit is swallowed up in the flames below. The fireman reaches out for the little girl as she extends her hand towards his. They both stretch as far as they can, just a little further. They're almost touching, almost there. Just as their fingertips touch, the rest of the floor gives way, and they both fall. Outside, multiple crews man hoses and fight against the blaze, trying to contain the fire which is quickly getting out of control. There's a cry from one of the teams, and the men start running as a large portion of the building collapses. "Was anyone still in there? Where's John?" the fire chief asks anyone he can find, but no one has seen him. Just then, in the entrance of the building, a figure appears, silhouetted against the flames. It's John. He steps out of the burning building. His suit looks like it has been completely melted by the flames. Somehow, he's alive, but he's alone. As the other firefighters rush to help him, he looks like he is in a daze. They ask him what happened, if there's anyone else inside who might still be able to make it out, but he can only stare at them. A few weeks later, John is sitting in the firehouse. His fellow firefighters can still hardly believe that he made it out of that inferno unscathed. But while the fire miraculously didn't touch his body, it seems to have made an impression in other ways. He's once again at a table with numerous papers spread in front of him. One of the other firemen from his crew starts teasing him about working on one of his projects yet again. What is it this time? Is he doing his monthly budget again, checking credit card statements for fraudulent charges? John is working on his retirement plan, actually. That fire may have shown him that life can be cut quite short, but it also taught him that it's important to get your life in order so that the time you do spend on this earth is well spent. The fireman is laughing at John's newfound fiscal responsibility when the bell starts to chime. No more jokes. It's time to suit up and get out. The firefighters arrive at another large structure fire. A man rushing out of the building tells them between coughs that there's still people inside. The firemen don't hesitate and head into the building. They search the second floor and see a door with smoke billowing out from underneath it. John checks the door for heat and gives a thumbs up. They open the door and head inside. The smoke is so thick that neither of them can see much of anything. But then, through the smoke, they spot something. A woman is lying on the floor. They both step towards her when a beam comes crashing down from the ceiling. They both leap out of the way, and the fireman barely escapes being crushed. He stands up and asks if John is okay, but no response. He quickly looks around, but he can't see him. It's as if he just vanished. But there's no time to figure out what happened. He scoops up the woman, who coughs as he picks her up. She's still alive. As the fireman exits the building with the woman, she appears to have completely regained consciousness. The chief approaches them, but the fireman can only shake his head as if to say, John didn't make it this time. The woman who was rescued from the fire is in the hospital. The doctors can hardly believe it, but she tells them she's fine, and x-rays of her lungs show that there's nothing wrong at all. It's as if she hadn't just been carried out of a building where multiple civilians and firefighters were killed. The doctor tells her that they'll need to run a couple more tests, but if those come back clear, then he doesn't see any reason to hold her. As he is leaving her room, though, he stops and turns to her with one last thing. She has some visitors. The woman seems confused. As the doctor exits the room, a group of several people in dark black suits walk in. They look like FBI or CIA agents, but they don't have any badges. Good afternoon, ma'am. We're from the SCP Foundation. We've been looking for you. As the Foundation agents took this young woman into custody, researchers were already preparing a containment cell for her. Though once she got there, she would have a new name, SCP-069. This anomaly is a humanoid entity, though its exact appearance can vary dramatically thanks to its bizarre ability. Whenever SCP-069 is left alone with a recently deceased person's body, 069 will acquire its exact appearance. And not only will SCP-069 look like the recently expired individual, it will also take on their physical mannerisms, their voice, and even their patterns of speech, allowing it to look and sound exactly like the person who just passed away. In the same moment that it begins mirroring the person, the corpse will also disappear by a process that Foundation researchers have yet to understand. the body vanishes without a trace, leaving only the new SCP-069 instance alive and well in its place. This doppelganger will be virtually indistinguishable from the original, with even DNA and fingerprint tests coming back as a match for the original. Friends and family will have no idea that an anomalous entity has taken their place, since in addition to taking on all of the physical qualities of the deceased person, SCP-069 will also gain their knowledge and memories. They will act exactly as the person did, with only one single difference setting them apart. Those who are around SCP-069 in the days and weeks after its transformation will notice that the person will suddenly start expressing a strong desire to get their life in order, with that vague phrase relating to any number of potential tasks. These can include resolving outstanding obligations in their life, either personal like paying back an owed favor, or financial, such as resolving debts or making long-term life plans like opening retirement accounts and updating their last will and testament. They will also often make efforts to visit with extended or estranged family members, rekindle friendships that have been allowed to languish, or other acts of closure, the kind that can build up over a lifetime and are often put off until it is too late. SCP-069 seems to retain no knowledge of its previous impersonations, and it will not carry any memories or abilities from one instance to another, outside of the one recurring desire to make things right in its new form's life. When an identified SCP-069 entity has been asked why it is engaging in this new behavior, it claims to have no ulterior motives besides an overwhelming desire to get their life straightened out since, after all, you never know when an unforeseen injury or death might occur. 069 itself experiences pain, injuries, and death just as a normal human does, but those similarities end at the exact moment they expire. When SCP-069 dies, its body will rapidly decay, turning to dust almost instantly. The Foundation has tried to preserve its body or at least stave off the rapid decomposition, but so far, all attempts have failed. After it has died, SCP-069 will then remanifest at the site of the most recent human death, regardless of its proximity to where 069 died. There does not appear to be any distance limitation to this ability, and the largest such jump the Foundation has recorded is to a death that was 675 kilometers away from where its previous form died. This anomaly first came into the SCP Foundation's radar after field agents learned of a firefighter who appeared to miraculously survive an extremely deadly building fire, which claimed the lives of 2 other firefighters and 11 civilians. The firefighter had walked out of the building unscathed, despite his suit and equipment suffering an amount of damage that their wearer should not have been able to survive. Roughly 3 weeks later, the same firefighter responded to another large building fire. He was lost inside a smoky room and was presumed to have died, despite his body never being recovered. A single civilian was rescued, and much like the firefighter, appeared unharmed, a virtual impossibility given the extremely smoky conditions from which she was saved. An SCP containment team, Mobile Task Force She-3, also known as the Body Snatchers, were sent to the hospital where she was recovering the next day, and SCP-069 was identified and taken into Foundation custody for the first time. Containment of this particular anomaly would prove to be quite tricky though, especially when its abilities were not fully understood. Several years after its initial capture, a guard assigned to SCP-069's cell was killed during a containment breach by another SCP, and the proximity of the guard's corpse to SCP-069 allowed them to take on their form. Though it was quickly discovered that the jump had taken place, and SCP-069 was returned to containment, they remained insistent that the Foundation was making a mistake and imprisoning one of their own. Over time, though, their protestations waned, and eventually, SCP-069 became relatively compliant and cooperative with staff. That is, until a huge mistake was made that would necessitate a drastic change to its containment procedures. A junior researcher who was assigned to 069 accidentally let slip that the agent's family had been informed of their untimely death. This seemed to greatly distress 069, and they reacted to the news by attempting to commit suicide. It's unknown what exactly triggered this response, since just being told that they were an imposter did not appear to have this effect in the past. But something about the family learning of the original person's death seems to have a profound impact on SCP-069. Following this event, SCP-069 has been placed on suicide watch, and plans to use other recently deceased SCP Foundation employees as possible targets for its ability have been suspended. SCP-069 continues to live in the form of its former guard, and is housed at Humanoid Containment Site 06-3. It continues to insist that it actually is the deceased agent, and still expresses a desire to get its life in order. Despite looking, sounding, and acting exactly as the former Foundation agent, it is not to be treated as if it is that person, no matter how tempting it may be for former friends and co-workers of the departed to have one last visit. If SCP-069 ever attempts to or is successful in breaching containment, it is to be subdued using non-lethal methods. Should SCP-069 die while in containment, Foundation agents are to closely monitor any reports of incidents where it appears that someone has somehow escaped certain death, a telltale sign that the person is now actually SCP-069. In the meantime, the Foundation will continue to study this strange anomaly, which has been classified as safe, and though we may never fully understand its abilities, perhaps there's something we can learn from it when it comes to second chances.
A hand clasps around your throat, cutting off your scream. You try to move, but the hands of the two people restraining you won't allow it. You're being dragged towards something monstrous and terrible in the corner, something hiding under a white sheet. You will die a painful death, and the ones dragging you towards it are your parents. As the dewy green of summer begins to fade, the grass drying, the air chilling, and the leaves turning shades of fire and gold, most children's thoughts turn to Halloween. Visions of fun-sized candy bars spilling out of plastic pumpkin buckets, of ill-fitting rubber masks that smell like the back of a party store, of candy apples and ringing doorbells, and terrifying their friends with scary stories. It's a magical time where anyone can be anything, and candy is free to anyone who asks the question, trick or treat. But as those children get older, Halloween begins to lose its magic. They age out of trick-or-treating and no longer find themselves amused by carving pumpkins or screaming at plastic skeletons in their neighbors' yards. They age out of the sense of wonder, and they find that their neighbors aren't as keen to give away candy to someone with a driver's license. But some children hold on to that love of Halloween into adulthood, transforming the childlike joy into an appreciation for parties, more mature scary stories with blood and guts aplenty, and yes, themed baked goods. You're never too old to enjoy a Rice Krispie treat shaped like a ghost. At least that's what the sorority girl planning the biggest Halloween party on campus at her small university believes. She has festooned the sorority house with fake cobwebs and ghosts made of hanging bits of gauze, with plastic spiders and zombies made of rubber. There are the classic plastic skeletons, the jack-o'-lanterns filled with battery-powered candles, no fire hazards here, and of course, a huge cauldron filled with punch and dry ice. Smoke billows over the sides of the cauldron as she stirs the garish but inviting lime green liquid inside. She has the lights rigged up to give the place an eerie red glow, and has the perfect playlist of Halloween music put together. Now she just needs to wait for the guests to arrive. At first, she worries that no one will come. The first few people to ring the doorbell turn out to be trick-or-treaters, and she sends them away with a fistful of candy bars and a smile. But each time, she is secretly a little disappointed. About an hour after she finished setting up, guests begin to arrive. Even if not everyone at school is into Halloween, there are very few college students who will pass up an opportunity for a party, and before long, the house is filled with dancing pirates, vampires sipping cups of punch, werewolves digging into bowls of chips, and cats flirting with dogs. Everyone is dressed up and embracing the Halloween spirit, and the girl couldn't be happier. She's been so busy playing hostess that she almost forgot to dress up, but she takes a moment to steal away upstairs and put on her costume. A classic witch costume, black dress, black shoes, and complete with a pointy black hat. As she heads back downstairs, dressed up and ready to have a great time, she takes a moment to survey the crowd. It seems like everyone on campus decided to come to her party. The girl is going to get herself a drink and settle in to enjoy her party when she hears the doorbell ring. Someone else is here. But as she walks toward the door, she pauses for a moment, an icy chill of dread washing over her. The party guests know that they can just walk right in. That's what they've been doing all night. And it's almost midnight, much too late for trick-or-treaters. Who's out there? She peers through the peephole and sees someone in a rudimentary ghost costume, covered head to toe in a white sheet. Even if it's someone she knows, she wouldn't be able to recognize them like that. She can't explain why, but she has a bad feeling about this person. She doesn't want to be rude, but she wants to let them in even less. She turns back away from the door, ready to let the stranger stand on her porch all night, and finds all of her party guests standing still, staring at the door, staring at her. She tries to laugh it off and get everyone to return to the party, but the energy in the room has shifted. Everyone's focus is on the person on the other side of the door. She walks to the punch bowl, pours herself a cup, and encourages everyone to get back to the party. Instead, a pirate and a mermaid walk to the door, turning the knob even as the girl asks them to stop. They open it, letting the stranger in the sheet inside. The figure glides through the door, moving in a way that seems just a little bit off. The girl is struck with a feeling that she hasn't experienced since she was a little girl, the sense, deep down in her gut, that something could really be a monster. Whatever she does, she can't let the thing in the sheet get close to her. She doesn't know what will happen, but the thought of it turns her stomach with a primal sense of danger. She starts to run, but a girl dressed as a tiger grabs hold of her arm, wrenching her back. The girl struggles to free herself, but a man in a vampire costume grabs her other arm, gripping her so tight his knuckles turn white, and she can feel the flesh bruising. She pleads with her friends, trying to get them to see reason and release her, but they won't budge. The tiger girl apologizes through tears, but won't let go. As the girl thrashes, pulling so hard to free herself that she worries her arm will break, the figure in the sheet inches closer and closer. She shouts at it, demanding to know who it is, what it wants, why it's hiding behind that sheet. But it doesn't say a word, doesn't give a clue. There's no expression to read, only the blank white fabric. When it reaches the girl, her feet fly out from under her, and she collapses to the ground, yanked forward by an unseen force. Something is pulling her under the sheet. She claws at the floor, trying to drag herself away from the force, but she can't. The party guests watch, helpless, as their hostess disappears under the sheet, until the only thing left is her writhing silhouette and her screams. Then, the screams go quiet. Nothing left of the girl but her witch's hat lying on the floor. The figure gathers its sheet around itself and calmly walks out of the party. Those unfortunate guests watched their even more unfortunate friend encounter the creature known as SCP-6096. SCP-6096 is a humanoid entity that spends all of its time hidden beneath a large cotton sheet. A vague sense of its shape can be garnered by observing the entity, but its body is hidden at all times, preventing a complete physical description from being recorded. However, Foundation researchers have determined via a cursory examination that the entity is 1.55 meters tall and that it weighs approximately 48 kilograms. The sheet itself is larger than SCP-6096's body, trailing on the ground behind it by at least a meter whenever the entity moves. All attempts to remove the sheet in order to get a proper look at the thing have been unsuccessful. One of the most unusual properties of SCP-6096 is that it cannot be harmed. I don't mean that it is impervious to damage, but rather that any living being that attempts to engage in a behavior that would harm the entity finds themselves unable to do so. This includes, but is presumably not limited to, actions such as attempting to attack SCP-6096, attempting to order others to attack SCP-6096, attempting to trick others into attacking SCP-6096 without their knowledge, laying a trap for SCP-6096, ordering others to lay a trap for SCP-6096, creating an autonomous device that would harm SCP-6096, attempting to leave SCP-6096 unsupervised and in harm's way, and attempting to remove SCP-6096's sheet. Most of the time, SCP-6096's behavior is described as peaceful and docile. As long as there is no danger present, it allows itself to be led into containment and remains there with seemingly no objections. However, every so often, the entity becomes active and will attempt to leave its location. It does so at a steady pace with single-minded persistence as it pursues one specific target at a time. It is uncertain how the entity chooses a target, but so far, it has always been a seemingly random human being somewhere on Earth. Not only does SCP-6096 know exactly who its target is, but anyone who observes the entity during an active period finds that they too know who it is seeking out. In addition to this anomalous effect, the person will also find themselves compelled to help SCP-6096 reach its intended target. These targets appear to be the only individuals unaffected by SCP-6096's anti-harm properties. A person that the entity has selected will, in fact, be able to harm it. However, none have managed to successfully do so, mainly due to the protective influence of the other humans caught in the creature's anomalous thrall. But what happens when SCP-6096 reaches its target? Research into this has been largely inconclusive, but a few facts are certain. SCP-6096 will pull the person underneath its sheet until they have disappeared from view. If the victim is conscious, they can be heard fighting, struggling, and screaming in unimaginable agony for up to 40 minutes. Then they go silent and are never seen again. Once its chosen victim has disappeared, SCP-6096 becomes docile and largely immobile again, and can be led back to containment. Whatever happens to its targets under that sheet, it is definitely not anything good. SCP-6096 was discovered by the SCP Foundation on September 12, 2018, when police were called to the home of the Mallion family in the town of Durham, New Mexico. Samuel and Amanda Mallion greeted the officers in a state of distress, claiming that a person wearing a sheet had come into their home and somehow caused their 16-year-old son Desmond to disappear. Authorities spotted SCP-6096 inside the home and planned to remove the sheet in order to interrogate and detain the suspect, but found themselves unable to take another step closer to the thing. Terrified by their inexplicable encounter, they submitted an incident report to their supervisor, who passed it up through the chain of command in the regional government until it landed in the hands of the SCP Foundation. Alongside the police report, the Foundation was able to access security camera footage from the Mallion family home. A transcription of the video's contents is included in the official Foundation files. I'll do my best to summarize its events. The home security footage depicts the Mallion family sitting on their living room couch, facing the television. Samuel and Amanda watch a program on TV as Desmond idly scrolls through his phone. Outside, a car can be heard pulling into the driveway. Though the driver's identity has not been confirmed, this is believed to be a local taxi driver named Drake Ellen, dropping SCP-6096 off at the Mallion's door. A moment later, Samuel draws his wife's attention toward a window. At first, the two are surprised but amused, assuming that SCP-6096 is some sort of errant Halloween decoration. However, they become increasingly disturbed as the sheet-covered figure approaches their door and begins to knock, so softly it is nearly inaudible. As Samuel gets up to enter the door, Amanda grabs her son's arm, holding him in an increasingly tight grip and refusing to let him pull away. Unable to stop herself, no matter how upset she becomes, she holds Desmond still as her husband lets SCP-6096 into the house. It glides across the floor toward Desmond, who struggles to break free from his crying mother's grasp. Amanda can be heard reassuring him, saying, "You just stay still, honey. You just close your eyes. It won't hurt if you just close your eyes. I love you." Desmond struggles harder, but finds himself unable to break his mother's hold. He kicks his legs, knocking his phone to the ground as the sheet-covered entity draws closer and closer. He begs his mother to let him go, but she doesn't budge. His father, through tears, says, "Just stay still, son. Just stay still. It won't hurt for long. It can't hurt for long. Stay strong. Stay strong for me." Starting with his feet, the entity begins to cover Desmond with its sheet, pulling him out of sight. Amanda and Samuel watch in wordless, open-mouthed horror, silent screams stretching their faces into masks of terror and grief. Desmond can be heard screaming, thrashing violently beneath the sheet, though what exactly is happening to him under there cannot be seen. This continues for the next 36 minutes, until Desmond has completely vanished. At this point, SCP-6096 wraps itself in its sheet and sits down on the floor, watching the television without a care in the world. Amanda and Samuel, on the other hand, find themselves able to move on their own again, and must reckon with what they just saw, what they just participated in. Samuel collapses to the ground, curling up in the fetal position and rocking back and forth in shock. Amanda stumbles backward, keeping her eyes locked on SCP-6096, and dials 911 on her cell phone. They stay right there until the police arrive. At this point, the video log cuts out. After the SCP Foundation was notified of the incident at the Mallion family home, Foundation officers administered Class A amnestics to Amanda and Samuel, as well as to all responding officers who encountered SCP-6096. It is uncertain how long SCP-6096 was operating before this incident, or where it could have come from. SCP-6096's containment is strictly under the jurisdiction of Mobile Task Force Zeta-29, Blood Brothers. The anomaly is kept in a standard humanoid containment chamber, located on the grounds of Site-19, where it is monitored by on-site personnel via video and audio recording devices. If any changes in its behavior are noted, they are to be promptly logged and reported. Unlike most anomalies at the SCP Foundation, SCP-6096 is permitted to leave its containment area whenever it chooses.
Whenever it does choose to leave, SCP-6096 must be escorted to its intended destination by MTF Zeta-29. Task Force members may use whatever method of transportation is most convenient at the time. While this group is escorting the entity, a secondary team will travel to its intended target, dosing them with a high-grade tranquilizer to render them unconscious. Once the entity has disposed of its target, it will be accompanied back to its containment chamber. There are no easy jobs at the SCP Foundation, aside from the lucky few who get to spend their days playing with SCP-999. But staff assigned to the containment, if you can even call it that, of SCP-6096 report some of the lowest morale levels at the organization. A welcome notice from Charlie Szymanski, commander of Mobile Task Force Zeta-29 Blood Brothers, is included in the official file, presumably for Task Force member eyes only. Nevertheless, I feel it is important that I share the contents of this note with all of you, as they provide a valuable look into the perspective of the members of this unfortunate task force. It reads, "And there you have it. Welcome to Mobile Task Force Zeta-29. No need to worry about professionalism down here. The higher-ups couldn't demote me if they wanted to. Apparently my presence as the head of SCP-6096 containment is beneficial enough to it that me being reassigned would count as harming it. Lucky me. You're probably wondering how we can be shameless enough to say we have this thing under containment. It comes and goes whenever it feels like it, and if it ever decided it didn't want to come back to its containment cell, we have literally no way of forcing it. And yeah, you're probably also thinking that calling that room a containment chamber instead of a hotel room is just as shameful. To that I say, you're absolutely right. There's nothing we can do against SCP-6096. Feel free to self-medicate until you're able to accept that. Don't hold back. You're going to become very familiar with that feeling of gnawing guilt. I know I did, the first time I had to hold the door to a maternity ward open for this thing. The idea of containing SCP-6096 is a bad joke. We all decided a long time ago that the only way out of this nightmare is liquidation, decommissioning, neutralization, whatever you want to call it. But that's no walk in the park either. I've stood in that chamber for hours, gun pointed at 6096's head, screaming at my finger just to tighten slightly. Didn't work. You can't harm SCP-6096, no matter how much you want to. You can't even try to start a Rube Goldberg kind of thing to eventually harm SCP-6096. It's just a fact of the world, maybe a semiohazard or whatever it's called. The way I see it, then, there are three main ways out of this nightmare. One, another organization, maybe the GOC, takes a shot at it without realizing what they're dealing with. Maybe they think we're transporting something much more dangerous. Maybe they think we're in over our heads with it, and they take it out with a drone or something, blow the thing to hell while we're transporting it. A bomb would kill it easy, I think. It feels weak. This would only work so long as the GOC thinks they're bombing something else entirely. If they knew it was SCP-6096, they'd just be contained too. 2. An AIC deals with it. I don't know if an artificial intelligence is immune to SCP-6096's effects, but the fact that it won't let me tell one of them about it gives me hope. Maybe one day one of those computers gets a mission, and maybe that mission, by complete coincidence, happens to lead them over to this file. Then they use their superior intelligence to set things up so 6096 runs into an accident out of the blue. 3. A target gets lucky. Maybe 6096 goes after a gun nut, and the poor guy gets a lucky shot in before we can hold him down. This almost happened once, but Lopez took the bullet. Poor guy bled out while we were holding the target down for 6096. Maybe it'll happen again, go better. Maybe. Let's be honest. These scenarios aren't scenarios, they're fantasies. The odds of any of these things happening on their own are tiny, minuscule. The only thing that can really do 6096 in, far as I can see, is sheer coincidence. All we can do is wait and hope. Hope for one of us to make a genuine mistake that gets the right dominoes falling. But I wouldn't hold your breath. After all, we're so good at what we do. Of all the anomalies I have studied, SCP-6096 is one that troubles me more than almost any other. I have lost sleep watching the Malian family security footage again and again, each time shocked by the sight of two tearful parents helping a sheet-covered stranger steal their only son, doing who knows what to him in the process. No matter how hard I try, I cannot discern SCP-6096's motives, its origins, or even what its real face looks like. Perhaps it doesn't have one. Perhaps there's nothing under that sheet. The hardest part is knowing that I will likely never know.
That uncertainty is so much worse than any of the horrible truths I have uncovered in my years of studying the anomalies that hide in the shadows of our world. Though I may never uncover the answers to the mystery of SCP-6096, there is one thing I know for certain. I will never be able to relax around Halloween. That walking bedsheet might be someone who ran out of time to plan a proper costume and just grabbed the first thing they could find. Or it could be a faceless horror walking with the relaxed gait of the incomprehensibly powerful on its way to claim another unfortunate soul. A young woman is spending the morning in town, completing a few errands she's been meaning to get to for a while. She picks up a few items from the supermarket, gets the cracked screen on her smartphone repaired, and decides to treat herself to a Danish from a local bakery. It's a relatively idyllic Tuesday, until she turns the corner into a narrow side street and sees them. It can often be a little disconcerting to suddenly find yourself staring at a crowd that is gathered for seemingly no reason, but something about this one makes her particularly nervous, and she quickly realizes why. Each person in the tightly packed together group is grinning, as if they are all in on a particularly cruel joke about her. At face value, they all seem to be very different people, a collage of ages, races, genders, in different clothes with different styles, and yet they're all walking with perfect synchronicity, one perfectly timed footfall at a time. This is enough to seriously creep her out. Whatever this strange group of people is doing, she wants no part of it. Instead, she turns and heads in the opposite direction, fast walking and stealing discreet but frequent glances over her shoulder. She can't help but notice, even when the crowd exits the small side street, that they remain huddled together, like security guards packed tight around some invisible VIP. And even worse, they seem to be following her trajectory, getting faster, getting closer, still perfectly in sync with one another. How are all these people gaining so fast? She thinks to herself. When she's around a corner and out of sight, she does the sensible thing and breaks into a sprint, eager to put some distance between herself and them. Even though they haven't shown any signs of overt aggression, she can tell on some visceral level that they mean her great harm. She knows if ever they get close enough, within grasping distance, something terrible will happen. She's soon back at her home and locks herself in, bolting the door behind her. She breathes a sigh, but she's not relieved, not really. Maybe she's paranoid, but she feels like she isn't out of the woods just yet. Those eerie smiles, those perfect footsteps, she can't get them out of her mind. She slips into her kitchen and slides a knife out of the block. She tells herself that doing this is a little crazy, but having some kind of weapon in hand makes her feel at least a little bit safer. But whatever the feelings of comfort the knife gives her are shattered when she hears the doorbell ring. She hadn't ordered anything. She wasn't expecting anyone. Who could that be? She hides the knife behind her back and makes her way towards the door. Ding dong, it rings again. Whoever is on the other side is getting impatient. She opens the door slightly, but leaves the chain in place. There's a smiling man in a business suit on the other side. She's racking her brain, trying to remember. Is he one of the people from the crowd? Or is she just imagining things because she's freaked out? She can't tell anymore. She can feel her palm getting sweaty around the knife's handle. The man at the door clears his throat and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, I won't take up too much of your time, but I wanted to ask, have you heard the good word?" She shakes her head and tells the stranger that she isn't interested in hearing his pitch, but he just keeps smiling and presses on. Do you ever feel lonely, dissatisfied, unfulfilled? Don't you ever wish that you could become a part of something bigger than yourself? It'd be a real weight off your shoulders. She's starting to run out of polite ways to deny him when she hears a faint tapping against the nearby glass. The young woman turns her head and looks into her living room. There's a smiling woman standing at the window, rapping on the glass with her knuckles, grinning. The chill sets in immediately. She recognizes that face with absolute certainty. It's one of the people from the crowd, and now she knows for sure that the man at the door is too. But when she turns back to him, all she sees is his hand reaching through the gap in the door for her. She screams and backs away, instinctively slashing the knife at him. 2 fingers fall to the floor, but there's no blood, just thick, flesh-colored pus dripping from the 2 stumps. The hand doesn't even flinch. It keeps reaching, and soon the gap in the door is crowded with the faces of even more grinning human figures. She turns and runs as the sheer collected momentum of the crowd forces open the door. They spill into the hallway, tumbling over each other, but still smiling.
She notices something trailing out of their clothes. Long, sinewy ropes that look like they're made of living flesh, wriggling and pumping with each passing second. This whole situation seems to just be getting worse and worse. Thinking quickly, she decides to flee up the stairs. If she gets to her bedroom fast enough, she can lock her door from the inside, open the window, and climb down the trellis into the yard before they can break in. In that moment, it seems like the best course of action, but only because she has no idea just how quickly the crowd can close the distance. In an instant, the crowd is up onto the stairs and following her, extending their grasping hands in unison. Who are these people? Why are they doing this? The questions that flood her mind are soon forced out by the shock of the grinning stranger in the business suit, pulling her into a powerful bear hug. He squeezes hard, and she can feel it in her muscles and bones. She wriggles for her life, but she can't resist his strength. The rest of the crowd reaches for her. She spots those awful fleshy cords again, emerging from the backs of all these terrifying strangers. And now she sees what they're all leading back to, a giant, formless blob of flesh, like some corrupted unknown organ, a huge, monstrous tumor. It pulses and throbs. Just looking at it makes her want to be sick, and she can feel the most horrible energy coming off of it. Whatever this thing is, it wants her. It's reaching for her. Fight or flight kicks in, and this time flight isn't an option. The stranger in the suit has a good grip on her, in spite of his missing fingers, but she's still got the knife. She can see the cord trailing from his back into the giant flesh blob, and with one decisive strike, she severs it with the kitchen knife. Immediately, the man in the suit lets go of her. Both ends of the cord flop down, spraying more of the flesh-colored pus, but the effect on the man himself is even more drastic. He flails around, making the most horrible guttural gurgling noises she's ever heard. He heaves and vomits out gallons of the pus. It sprays from his eyes and nose like a fire hose. It oozes down and out of his pant legs. His body deflates like a punctured balloon as the awful substance cascades out of him, until all that's left is a wet, vacant sack of skin and clothes, quivering on the floor. But she doesn't have time to dwell on the horrors she's just witnessed. She needs to get out of here, now. She turns and continues running up the stairs as the crowd regroups and begins chasing her. She can hear their perfectly synchronized footsteps sloshing through the liquids of their fallen member. They've barely even slowed down. She keeps running. She just needs to keep running. A number of hands close around her body. Several of them clamp around her wrist, squeezing tight until the knife falls from her hand and clatters to the ground. They've learned already. The crowd rises up and closes around her. No matter how hard she struggles, they won't budge. They just keep huddling in. She can hear the giant pulsing mass of flesh closing in behind her. She feels one of those long, fleshy cords slithering up her back, its fibrous strands easing their way into her flesh until the connection is made. Her eyes roll up into her head as it pumps the fluid into her body, melting away everything inside and congealing it into the same nightmarish slop that she'd just seen splattering out of the man in the business suit moments ago. Little by little, everything that was once her is hollowed out, filled in, and painted over. Once the transformation is complete, she smiles, just like all the others. But she's not she anymore. She's just another part of it, its newest addition. A replacement for the man in the suit. The crowd leaves shortly after, keeping perfect step, looking for some new friends. At some point, everyone has felt the desire to fit in, but one anomaly takes the desire to join the throng to its ultimate extreme. This is SCP-428, also known as The Crowd. In its purest state, SCP-428 is an amorphous mass of flesh connected to a number of human hosts with organic tendrils, similar to umbilical cords. The central mass is obscured by its multiple human hosts, numbering 14 at the present moment, and it is an extremely dangerous entity. Once an individual is assimilated into its mass, they are to be considered lost. Upon assimilation, all of the victim's complex internal structures, bones, musculature, organs, nervous system, are instead replaced by material similar in composition to the amorphous mass that controls them. All that remains is their skin and vague shape, being piloted by the SCP-428 hub. When not actively seeking new victims to assimilate, SCP-428 enters a dormant state, its assimilated victims standing in a circle around the hub, audibly mumbling to one another and swaying gently. SCP-428 and its crowd will enter a hostile state if anyone travels within 2 meters of it. With surprising speed and ferocity, members of the crowd will try to mob the unfortunate victim in a sudden ambush, bringing them into the proximity of the hub. If they remain in this state for over 10 seconds, a cord will attach to their body, and
and their vital systems will be replaced, and they will be assimilated into the crowd, just like the other victims of SCP-428 were before them. If, however, the victim somehow manages to escape before the process is complete, this will not be the end of their ordeal. Should someone evade its attention, SCP-428 and the crowd will enter a period of active hunting behavior to seek out the escaping victim. Failing that, they will try to assimilate any human wandering into their vicinity. There is no safe way to approach SCP-428 or any of its members under any circumstances. To do so is to court a fate worse than death. When a victim is assimilated, SCP-428 and the crowd will return to a dormant state until another victim presents itself. Foundation studies have determined that SCP-428 seeks to add at least one person to its crowd every month, and if a person is not provided, then it will engage in hunting behavior, putting everyone in the area in grave danger. SCP-428 isn't controlling a gaggle of mindless zombies, though. It is an extremely intelligent hive mind, made all the more frightening by the fact that it absorbs the knowledge, memories, and skills of each of its victims, and can reapply them through any of the others. Because of this, it appears to have incredibly adept knowledge of the human mind, and will happily resort to using tactics of psychological manipulation to gain an advantage. Despite being a large crowd, tests have shown that SCP-428 and its assimilated victims can move terrifyingly fast. This is because, due to the very nature of the perfectly attuned hive mind, they can walk or run in perfect synchronicity. To best understand this, picture a centipede skittering at great speed across a wall. So many legs, but all sharing a perfectly coordinated nervous system, working together to move the creature with military precision. Even individually, each member of the crowd is a formidable foe. Once they become part of SCP-428, they exhibit greatly increased strength. They show no signs of feeling pain, and also have the ability to quickly heal any injuries. Wounds also do not seem to impede function whatsoever. A member of the crowd getting shot in the leg won't slow it down in the slightest. However, while this creature is incredibly intelligent and dangerous, the same can be said for the SCP Foundation, and in the time since they discovered it, they have ascertained a few weaknesses, even though some of this knowledge came at a heavy cost. Though members of the crowd appear significantly resistant to damage, the SCP-428 hub itself appears to be vulnerable to attack and more than capable of feeling pain. If the hub is damaged in a manner that would cause pain, every member of the crowd is able to feel it, often collapsing and writhing around in agony. When the creature collects itself, it will retreat, guarded by its human shields. The Foundation has used this method to corral the creature back into containment during breaches, with the controlled applications of fire or electricity being favorite methods of Foundation security forces. Severing the connection between a member of the crowd and the central hub is also a surefire way to weaken the overall ability of SCP-428. A severed crowd member will immediately collapse, the SCP-428 material inside it liquefying and excreting from every orifice. This may intensify SCP-428's drive to discover a new victim, but it can also be used as a method of population control for the crowd itself. There has been one major incident concerning SCP-428 since its containment at the SCP Foundation, and it acted as a painful reminder to all staff that one should never underestimate the abilities of the anomalies they contain. Evidently, one of the people assimilated by SCP-428 in the past was skilled in the art of lockpicking, as SCP-428 had absorbed this skill. It took apart one of its members' belts and used the pieces to pick the lock of its containment chamber from the inside. It then positioned one of its female victims crouching just outside the door, the cord slithering through the crack in the door behind her. She fell to her knees and began to weep loudly, attracting the attention of a nearby researcher. Naturally, when you hear a distressed person crying, it's human instinct to go investigate and help, and this particular researcher hadn't been briefed on the nature and abilities of SCP-428, which left him completely unprepared for the horrifying fate that awaited him. As he leaned in to comfort the crying woman, the rest of the crowd immediately emerged from the containment chamber's door, mobbing him. One forced its hand over his mouth, stifling his frightened scream as he was pulled in and quickly assimilated. While SCP-428 could pick locks, absorbing a member of SCP Foundation staff, both giving it access to the Foundation site layouts and inner workings, as well as a presentable frontman to assuage suspicion, was like getting its fleshy tendrils on a kind of master key. SCP-428 and its crowd, with the assimilated researcher at the head, progressed through the building, avoiding key security checkpoints and absorbing several other researchers and guards along the way.
This was a particularly frightening development, as it allowed SCP-428 to further expand both its knowledge of the SCP Foundation and its skills in everything from science to armed and hand-to-hand combat. With every new person it took in, it grew significantly stronger and more dangerous to Foundation personnel. Thankfully, it drew the right kind of attention before it had a chance to escape the containment site proper. A mobile task force was dispatched to contain SCP-428 and the Crowd and force it back into its containment chamber. However, being an extremely persistent creature, this minor setback didn't do anything to quell its desire to escape. Given that several members of its Crowd were now ex-Foundation staff members, it tried to leverage this in order to manipulate the people guarding its chamber. This became such a problem that a researcher appended a note to its file, reading, "People, these casualties are gone. They are SCP-428 now. No matter what it might say or do, they are not your work colleagues nor your friends anymore. Remember this, it may save your life." SCP-428 and its Crowd is currently contained in a 5 meter by 5 meter by 5 meter cell, with walls electrified to 30,000 volts to discourage attempts by members of the Crowd to break or climb them. The cell is accessed via an airlock, and entry is restricted to Level 3 researchers and below, while escorted by 2 armed guards in order to eliminate the risk of SCP-428 absorbing a valuable asset to the SCP Foundation and coming into possession of truly catastrophic knowledge and skills as a result. Just imagine the disastrous results if, say, a member of the O5 Council was suddenly a part of SCP-428. Researchers are to remain a minimum of 2 meters away at all times, and it is mandatory for at least 2 armed guards to stay posted at the chamber's entrance at all times. SCP-428 is to be given 1 member of D-Class personnel to assimilate every single month in order to prevent it from engaging in hunting behavior. Due to SCP-428's frightening ability to absorb memories, skills, and intelligence, all D-classes given to 428 are screened for low intelligence and a lack of valuable skills to ensure that the anomaly isn't being given any new aces up its sleeves. However, continually giving SCP-428 new victims is going to increase its overall size and thus necessitate gradual containment upgrades. The possibility of permanently neutralizing SCP-428 is being explored, but in the meantime, it has been given the Euclid Object Class because of its intelligence, skills, and unpredictability. While the SCP Foundation is all about sacrificing the individual for the greater good, this is one frightening collective that they couldn't endorse becoming a part of.
It's late on a Saturday night in New York City, 11:55 p.m. to be exact. A man is running towards the subway station on 59th Street. He's just gotten off from work at the restaurant where he waits tables, and he's in a hurry to get home and spend some time with his girlfriend. As he approaches the station, he notices something strange. Someone has placed a wooden barrier in front of the entrance. The man has never seen something like this before, but he hasn't lived in Brooklyn very long. Everything about the station looks normal behind the barrier, and he's in a hurry. He doesn't want to have to go several blocks to the next station, so he hops the barrier. What's the worst that could happen? As the man walks onto the train platform, he starts to second-guess his decision. The platform is empty, and come to think of it, he hasn't seen anyone in the station at all. Maybe he did make a mistake. Maybe the station really is closed for repairs. He turns around to leave, but just as he does, he hears a train. Good. Everything is normal. He checks his watch. 11:57 p.m. on the dot. The train comes to a stop, and its doors slide open. It looks a little older than the trains he usually rides, but it appears to be in perfect shape, and it's going the direction of his home, so he steps on board. Just like the station and the platform, there's no one else on the train. Strange, but he's ridden nearly empty trains before, especially late at night, though usually at this time on a Saturday there's at least a few people on board. Just then, he hears something in the station. He turns to see someone running down the platform crying out. "Stop! Stop!" the man in the Mass Transit Authority vest cries, dropping what looks to be his dinner on the platform as he runs. While the MTA worker is still several feet away, the doors snap shut, and the train begins to move. The MTA worker cries out again to stop, but he knows there's no point. He watches as the train heads down the tracks and disappears into the darkness. With a sigh, he takes out a walkie-talkie and it squawks to life. "We've lost another one," he says. "Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-052, also known as the Time-Traveling Train." SCP-052 appears to be a standard-looking Type R4 New York City subway train.
Official city records state that the train was built in 1932 and decommissioned for scrap in 1975. Despite the fact that it should no longer exist, SCP-052 continues to appear on the Uptown AD track at the 59th Street and 8th Avenue station at exactly 11:57 p.m. every Saturday night. The train appears to be in perfect condition, just the same as when it was built over 80 years ago, and it is marked as an A train. Each Saturday, the train arrives at exactly the same time, opens its doors to accept or discharge passengers for precisely 5 minutes, then closes its doors and disappears until the next week. Where did the train come from? And where does it go in between the weekly appearances? These are questions the SCP Foundation is trying to answer, but perhaps the most frightening aspect of SCP-052 is that once you get on the train, there's no guarantee of ever getting off. Sadly, the majority of subjects that have been observed boarding SCP-052 have not been heard from again. The rare few that have been recovered claim to have boarded the train on various dates, ranging from 1976 all the way to the year 2204, with the latter claiming he thought he was boarding a special 300th anniversary train. Thus far, none of the recovered passengers have reported any memories or knowledge of their time on board the train between entering and exiting. Any passengers spotted disembarking from SCP-052 are to be immediately brought to Site 21 for questioning to determine their origin and assess whether they pose any threat to the current time stream. The Foundation has had great success administering Class A amnestics to passengers who arrived from the past and reintegrating them into society. But any passenger who is identified as being from the future must be held indefinitely to prevent potential disruptions to this reality's time stream, per Order 69-A1 from O5 Council Member 05-9. There are currently 26 recovered passengers being held at Site 21 who fit this description, and there are not yet any procedures in place that would allow for their safe release into modern society, nor has there been any workable theories for how to return them to their original home time. Despite the protocols in place to prevent public access, some passengers from the present have still managed to accidentally board SCP-052, and subjects from other times continue to appear. Following interviews, it's been discovered that some of these subjects arrived from alternate timelines and realities. This raises the question of whether it is possible for SCP-052 to appear in other times and places, which may require the containment of additional locations, and reports of any suspicious activity involving unscheduled trains are being monitored and investigated around the world. Following its initial discovery, several tests were attempted in order to better understand the anomalous train and what may be happening when it is no longer visible. The first test took place on May 31, 2009. An agent was told to simply board the train. They did as requested and have yet to be recovered as of the present date. A second test took place a week later on June 6th. This agent too was never recovered, though reports indicate that he may have returned to our timeline in 1980, at which point he was killed in a confrontation that has since been classified. A third test was conducted the next week on June 13th. Once again, the agent was told to board the train and did so. This time, though, the agent returned. Just 2 weeks later, on June 27th, the agent stepped back off the train, with his hands appearing to have been surgically removed. A note had been placed in his pocket that had the simple message, "Send no more," written on it. The agent claims not to remember any of his experiences on the train over the 2 weeks he was gone, or what may have happened to his hands. Following this third test, O5 Command issued orders stopping the use of Foundation agents as passengers on SCP-052. D-Class, due to their disposable nature as convicted felons and death row inmates, were considered as potential replacements for the agents in the exploration of SCP-052, but the risk of releasing them into the past or the future was determined to be too great. Other than the agent who knowingly boarded the train, several other notable passengers have been recovered. One case involved the recovery of a woman who entered the train on July 14, 2012, but was recovered 4 years earlier, on March 8, 2008. She entered the train while on her way home from the theater, and was surprised to learn she traveled 4 years into the past. Because another version of her existed at the time she was recovered, she was held to prevent unwanted temporal effects. Another subject was recovered in 2008 who claimed to be from the year 1976. Although there was nothing physically wrong with him and no risk of time stream disruptions, Foundation psychiatrists recommended that he be held indefinitely, as 32 years was believed to be too long a period of time to successfully reintegrate into society. Perhaps the most interesting recovery was of a man claiming to be a Level 4 supervisor from the SCP Federation, who boarded the train in December of 2124. He said that he had been administered a Class A amnestic prior to boarding, and remembered nothing until his recovery in 2010. While the agent can clearly never be released into society, O5 Command has approved the sharing of classified information about various anomalies, in the hopes that he can provide additional information on possible containment procedures. Because SCP-052 has so far proven impossible to stop or remove from the New York City subway system, it has been classified as Euclid. But its predictable nature means that the Foundation is usually able to prevent the public from encountering it. The 59th Street ABCD station is closed to the public between 11 p.m. on Saturday night and 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, under the pretext of track maintenance. Any passengers seen leaving SCP-052 must be taken to Site 21 for debriefing and processing, and members of the public who simply see SCP-052 may be released after the administration of a Class B amnestic. As for what happens to most of the passengers who board SCP-052 and are never seen from again, we simply don't know.
It's October 31st, 2021, and anyone who's anyone in the upper crust of society knows that there's really only one place to celebrate Halloween if you want to stay relevant: a certain Norwegian billionaire's yearly costume ball. Invitations are highly exclusive, and if you have to ask where you can get one, you're definitely not on the list. Those lucky, beautiful, famous, or just plain rich enough to be invited receive the notice a year in advance, in an increasingly elaborate fashion each time. Rumor has it that one year the billionaire specially trained a flock of purebred carrier pigeons to deliver the invites, printed on scrolls recovered from the ruins of the Library of Alexandria. But that's just a rumor, of course. This year's invitations arrived in the form of a luxury sports car with a simple, gold-embossed card hidden in the glove compartment that read, "Lucky You." It then provided information on this year's theme, medieval fantasy. The dress code would be strict, and failure to comply would result in being barred from entering the event. It also included a vital piece of carefully guarded information: the location of the party. The lavish event is held in the billionaire's castle, nestled in the remote countryside of Norway, which he had built a decade ago specifically for this one night a year. For the other 364 days, it sits vacant, except for a full staff to keep it in prime condition, of course. As a group of first-time partygoers pull up the long, winding driveway to the castle's gates, their limo is stopped by a guard. "Your driver will need to let you out here," he explains. "Can't have someone who isn't on the list coming up to the residence," your host insists. And so the group, 2 men and 2 women, climbs out of the car, and they all make their way up the drive on foot. They didn't prepare for the trek, and by the time they reach the castle gates, the ladies are sweating into their exquisite handmade gowns, and one of the gentlemen has torn a small hole in his tights. Nevertheless, they have arrived at what promises to be a truly grand occasion. Once the gates creak open and grant them admission, they quickly forget the discomfort of the long walk. Reports of the event have not, in fact, been greatly exaggerated. It is every inch as impressive as they could have imagined it would be. A lush golden carpet rolls out from the doors into the ballroom, and a herald clad in period attire blows a horn to signal their arrival. He announces their names to the room, where beautiful people are already dancing and frolicking to their heart's content. There are rows and rows of delicious-looking food, including roasted pigs, fresh fruit, and cakes. There are fountains filled with the finest champagne, and a full orchestra provides live music that fills the enormous halls. Above it all, the host himself sits, dressed in regal robes and a crown positively dripping with jewels. It is the most indulgent, decadent, glorious event any of them have ever been a part of. There are no clocks inside the party castle, and no other way to note the passage of time while inside. This is entirely deliberate, and an event there ends only when the guests have all grown too weary to continue the merriment. It is for this reason that the 4 newcomers do not notice how late it has grown, or the fact that one day has already bled into the next outside the castle. By the time they stumble back outside, filled with cake, champagne, and fresh gossip they can't wait to repeat, it is nearly dawn. They walk back down the path that led them to the castle, their steps a little heavier with exhaustion and the aforementioned champagne, and notice that there are rows of limousines and other cars waiting where they were dropped off. "Excuse me," one of the women calls out to a guard. "Where's our limo?" "Where did you tell him to wait?" the guard responds. At this, the woman looks at her companions, who all shrug. None of them were aware of this practice, and they sent the driver home when they left the car. "We didn't," she explains. The guard stares at her blankly for a moment, then bursts out laughing. "Well then," he says, "you'll just have to walk." Surely there's a contingency plan in place, right? Their wealthy host can't expect his guests to walk home if they didn't think to plan ahead and tell their driver to wait all night. The group waits for the punchline, revealed that there is a driver on staff ready to give them a ride or someone who can call them a cab, but it never comes. Not only that, but none of their cell phones have a signal. They can't call the driver to come back, even if he wasn't likely to be dead asleep at this hour. The guard is right, they will have to walk, at least until they have enough of a signal to call for a taxi. So, with no other option in sight, the disillusioned partygoers begin the long journey back to civilization. Light is beginning to trickle back onto the landscape, allowing them to at least see where they are going, but it is still mostly dark as they make their way along the road. "Are we safe out here?" one of the men asks. "From what, muggers?" the other replies. "There could be bears out here," one of the women remarks. "No," the other woman insists. "The bears are all hibernating this time of year, aren't they?" They all collectively shiver at the thought of encountering a bear or anything else out on this lonely road, with nowhere to hide and no way to defend themselves. Best not to dwell too long on that thought, or they might find themselves paralyzed with fear. They still have who knows how many steps left to go before they can relax. They walk together in silence for a long time, listening for the sound of any dangerous criminals or bears creeping up behind them, but nothing comes. As they slowly progress, the sun begins to emerge on the horizon, flooding the landscape with warm light and chasing away the fear of the dark. "Look," one of the ladies finally breaks the silence. "Up there!" She points, directing her friend's attention to a hill up ahead. There, they can make out the silhouettes of men on horseback, wearing suits of medieval armor. They're dressed as knights, like something out of a King Arthur story. "They must have come from the party." The others nod, agreeing. "Maybe we could ask for a ride?" one of the men suggests. "Or to borrow a horse," the other chimes in. In agreement, the four approach the knights in shining armor, waving their arms as they go. "Halt! Who goes there?" shouts one of the knights.
"Oh, there's no need for that," the other woman laughs. "We came from the same place."
"Art thou friend or foe?" the knight asks. He does not remove his helmet. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword. Thinking it all must be some kind of joke, the group of partiers continues up the hill. Spurred to action, the knight draws his sword, brandishing it threateningly. This is enough to stop the group in their tracks.
"Is he serious?"
mutters one woman to the other.
"I can't tell," she replies. "That sword looks pretty real, though."
Behind them, they hear the clip-clop of hooves and turn to see two other knights sitting atop massive black horses, brandishing weapons.
"I think we should go,"
she yells to her friends, gathering her skirts and running back down the hill, but the rest of the group don't seem so willing to turn back.
"You want to play a game?
Then let's play," says one of the men as he draws his own sword, a perfect replica of one wielded by a character in his favorite fantasy television series, and tries to wave it back at the knight, but he promptly drops it on the grass. It's much heavier than he thought it would be.
"Leave this place now, or face your death,"
a voice bellows from above him.
"Now wait just a minute. Who do you think you're talking to?"
the man says as he bends down to pick his sword up again. But before he can finish, there's a flash of glimmering steel in the sunlight, followed by a spray of dark red liquid that hits the rest of the partygoers. They watch in silent horror as the man's head rolls off his shoulders before looking back at the man on horseback. This isn't a game at all. The blood-stained partygoers turn and run from these frightening strangers on horseback, but they can hear the thunderous hooves following them, the clank of the metal armor. The woman who first began to run looks back over her shoulder and can't believe what she sees. It's a rout, as the mounted knights chase their fleeing foes, cutting them down in their retreat. All she can do is run and hope that they're too distracted with their current quarry to come after her. She doesn't know how long she runs before the sound of the massacre starts to fade out, but eventually, it does. Unable to run any longer, she collapses in the grass, frightened and confused by all that has happened. But with a scream, she jumps to her feet once again as she hears footsteps behind her.
"You can't sleep here,"
says a man with a harsh, barking voice.
"This is a restricted area."
Before her stands the second group of armed men she's seen that day. This time, they're dressed in modern military attire. The Norwegian army? She can't be sure. The man doesn't have an accent. She starts to plead with the man, but he abruptly cuts her off.
"What year is it?"
he asks, his expression serious. She answers, confused, giving him the current year. He relaxes. "This area is closed to the public. It's not safe for you to be here. Let me escort you out of the perimeter," he offers. She tries to tell him what she's seen, the strange men on horseback, her friends being slaughtered before her eyes. When the man asks how she got there, she lets the whole story come pouring out. The billionaire, the invitation, the party. In her frantic state, she doesn't notice one of the guards, who radios to someone that it looks like he's done it again. The man questioning her changes his tone. He doesn't seem at all concerned about a murderous group of medieval knights in the woods. "It sounds like you had a bit too much to drink," he tells her before putting a comforting arm around her shoulders. And she doesn't even notice the syringe until she feels a prick on her upper arm before losing consciousness. The woman would be returned home and have no memories of the events that she witnessed. She'd never remember how much danger she was in when she had a brush with SCP-526. SCP-526, also known as the Valhalla Gate, is located on a hill in Norway. The SCP Foundation has hidden information on the gate's exact whereabouts, no doubt to stop curious civilians from wandering into danger or filming short viral videos. But if you find yourself in the Norwegian countryside, it can still easily be identified. Simply look for a ring of 9 stones, each standing at about 2 meters tall, placed in a 10-meter radius at the top of the hill. If you're not certain whether you're in the right place, or if you just happened upon another mysterious stone circle, look for the runes inscribed on the inward surface of each one. If the runes are there, you're in the right place. Or the wrong place, depending on who you ask. Every day at sunrise, give or take about 15 minutes, the gate will open and release a group of warriors from any point in history, fully armed and outfitted for battle. These can range from a small group of archers to 300 Spartans to groups of highly trained special operatives, and every member of the temporarily displaced group will be from the same period in history. As if they all ran through some sort of rift at the same time. Though these resulting manifestations rarely harm anyone, staying in place 92% of the time after they first appear on the hilltop, the remaining 8% lead to scenarios which can truly be a bloodbath. After all, to an army lost in the fog of war, emerging in a strange land in an unfamiliar time, anyone can look like an enemy. No matter how they behave on their initial appearance, those who cross through SCP-526 will attempt to attack anyone who approaches the anomaly. They will remain in the area until sunset, at which time they disappear, presumably returning back to wherever and whenever they originated. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-526 after a group of backpackers were hospitalized in the area. They claimed to have been walking through the hills when suddenly they were swarmed by, quote, "a bunch of Vikings with axes." Naturally, this drew the attention of Foundation field agents, who soon found the mystical stone circle responsible for the attack. The survivors were given amnestics, and a cover story circulated blaming the claims of Vikings on recreational hallucinogens. Since this first incident, notable encounters between the Foundation and the soldiers traveling through the temporal gate have been few and far between, but there have been a few that were designated significant enough to be recorded in the official archives. 4, to be exact. In the 1990s, a member of the Foundation containment team spotted 40 figures making their way down the hill in the dim dawn light. They were holding longbows and swords, weapons at the ready as they made their descent. One member of the team, who it should be noted was on his very first day of containment duty, made the mistake of calling out to the strangers. "Gentlemen, please lower your weapons," he called. His request, however polite it may have been, was answered with an arrow to the shoulder. Thankfully, the rest of the team was able to swoop in and settle things before the situation could progress any further. The injured personnel was given prompt medical attention and reassigned to a desk job where he was much less likely to encounter flying projectiles of any kind. A few years later, the team of Foundation operatives placed at SCP-526 had started to grow complacent. There had not been a violent incident in ages, just a series of very confused people appearing at sunrise and milling around until they vanished at sunset. It seemed that most of the subjects passing through the temporal rift were not as bloodthirsty as one might expect. Then, one operative was startled out of a daydream by the thunk of a stone axe hitting a tree near his head. He and the rest of his team looked up to see a group of 30 men clad in animal skins pouring down the hillside, rushing right for them. In their fists, they held crude weapons carved from stone, their wild eyes, untamed beards, and blood-stained clothing becoming clearer as they grew closer. Fortunately for the SCP Foundation, these cavemen had brought clubs to a semi-automatic rifle fight. They opened fire, and within minutes, not a single hide-clad man was left standing. It was a bit awkward, looking at their fallen bodies for the rest of the day, but the team saw no point in moving them if they were just going to disappear that night anyway.
One task force member spent the rest of the day looking at his hands, paranoid he may have shot one of his ancient ancestors and erased himself from the timeline in a Back to the Future-like fashion. This was, thankfully, not the case. Several more years passed, and the century turned to usher in the new millennia. In the early 2000s, a platoon of 20 Russian soldiers, later identified when a Foundation officer attempted to translate several curses yelled at him by one of the men, materialized, wearing World War II uniforms and carrying rifles consistent with that time period. Most of them did not move from the hill, staying in a defensive position, but a few got a bit too bold and opened fire on the Foundation operatives. The fire was returned in kind, and 2 men were killed, but the rest were left unharmed for the remainder of the day. The final incident on record is particularly notable because, in this case, the soldiers that appeared did not belong to a particular country's military, nor were they from the distant past. There were 30 men and women, dressed in an uncomfortably recognizable uniform. These were the members of a lost SCP Foundation Mobile Task Force, all killed in action during a field mission several years prior. Wanting to avoid friendly fire, the operatives placed at the site attempted to speak to these MTF members, but they did not respond. Instead, they attacked and would not relent until air support arrived in the form of a Foundation AC-130 gunship, Thor's Hammer, leaving 3 dead and 11 wounded when the smoke finally cleared. This last encounter raised some difficult questions about the nature of SCP-526 and the mental state of those who passed through it. They seemed unable to recognize their own peers, unable to hear what they were saying. Their instinct to defend SCP-526 from any perceived invaders overrode whatever familiarity or loyalty they might ordinarily have for other Foundation operatives. It was a tragic, disquieting affair with no clear answers in sight. The SCP Foundation is of course no stranger to terminating its own, but the individual officers present for this incident reported a high rate of post-traumatic stress disorder, and several requested to be given amnestics in order to put a stop to recurring nightmares. The Foundation will not be able to learn more unless more of their own fallen soldiers pass through the gate. Even if they do, it is impossible to say whether they will be able to ask any questions or engage in a dialogue, or whether they will have to gun them down in another round of kill or be killed. Because there is no way to know what each new sunrise at SCP-526 will bring, the SCP Foundation has classified the anomaly as Euclid. As there is no way to move SCP-526 to any official Foundation site, the 15-kilometer radius around the anomaly has been converted into Armed Containment Area 31. The cover story for this area is a military weapon testing site, and there is a no-fly zone in effect there. A team of qualified field agents is placed on site in order to observe and neutralize any subjects that emerge from SCP-526. Because all is fair in war and, well, war, the agents placed there are permitted to use deadly force if their lives are threatened or the containment is jeopardized. 30 minutes before the sun comes up, the containment teams are placed on full alert and will keep their eyes on SCP-526 until the sun has set and all potential threats have disappeared. If a given day's apparitions are too aggressive or too numerous for the teams on the ground to contain, Mobile Task Force Sigma-9, or Valkyries, may assist via airstrike. Since the Foundation has set up its perimeter around SCP-526, no civilians have been harmed, though the same can't be said for Foundation personnel or the revolving door of strange warriors emerging on the hill. The protocol has been considered successful. I haven't yet been out to see the gate in person myself. I tend to be more of a pacifist, but if I ever do, I'll make sure to bring a shield, a bulletproof vest, and perhaps a full suit of armor. Why not? The best offense is a good defense, I always say.
Mom, come on, open up. This isn't funny.
The college student stands alone at the front door of her parents' house, tucked deep within the endless honeycomb of suburbia. It's a few minutes past midnight, and even the streetlights are out. What little she can see, she sees by the light of the indifferent moon. She calls up at the window.
Can you just let me in? Please, we can talk about this.
Nothing. Just closed curtains. She tries her phone, but her battery's dead. She must have used the last of her juice to hail an Uber on the way over. Less than an hour ago, the student was having the time of her life at a party a few neighborhoods away. She was back home from her out-of-state college for summer vacation, sleeping in her old childhood bedroom. Truth be told, she wasn't happy to be back, and didn't get the sense that her mom and dad were happy to have her back either. The student had never quite seen eye to eye with her mother. She was a stern, old-fashioned woman who could never really accept her daughter's lifestyle. In fact, she never even wanted her to leave for college. She always just wanted her little princess to find a nice husband and settle down just like she did. She'd taken her precious darling, choosing to leave the nest as a personal slap in the face. Tensions had simmered since the student's return. Snide muttered comments, poisonous glances, meaningful silences as they passed in the halls. And all that had spilled over into one spectacular shouting match because the student had the audacity to say she was going out to a party tonight.
"You are my daughter and this is my house,"
her mother screeched, veins rising in her forehead.
"Do you think you can make a fool out of me?"
The student stormed out after that, but she heard her mother's cruel words echoing out behind her.
"If you're out past midnight, don't expect to be let back in."
The student had thought it was an idle threat, and yet, here she is, standing on the porch of her own family home, lights off inside and out, stranded in the dark, in oppressive silence. She could hammer on the door, keep ringing the doorbell, maybe even try to throw something at the window, but if she made a scene, she might attract the attention of her neighbors, and that would only make the fallout tomorrow even worse. No, this place is a lost cause. She sighs and walks away from the house, beginning the slow, mournful walk down the sidewalk out of the neighborhood. Her best bet is going to a friend's place and crashing for the night, then trying to mend fences with her mom in the morning. Everything would be easier then. That's when it starts to rain. The low, steady hiss of falling raindrops all around her. She feels her clothes soaking through and her makeup running down her face. At this time of night, it feels so cold. It takes everything in her to hold back tears. Her friend's place is about 2 miles away. That's a long walk on a frigid, rainy night, and she feels utterly exhausted. It seems like nobody on Earth cares about her anymore. That's when the uniform sound of rainfall is broken by the engine of an approaching car, the glow of its headlights slicing through the gloom. For a moment, she feels a pang of fear, until she sees who's driving the car. It's a kind-looking middle-aged couple, a husband and wife, with soft, inviting features. They look like the kind of people she'd have seen at her mom and dad's garden parties as a kid. Friendly, neighborly, even. She feels like she can trust them. The car slides to a stop, the window rolling down. The husband leans out, his face twisted up in visible concern.
"You okay, honey?"
he asks.
"You need a lift?"
She hesitates for a moment. She thinks of a lifetime of advice given to her by her mom.
"Don't talk to strangers. Never get in an unfamiliar car."
But all that advice feels a little hollow coming from the same woman who locked her out and put her in this very situation. Rather than walking in the rain, she decides to accept the kindness and get into the back of the car. The husband and wife are so polite, so kind. They offer her soothing words as they drive in the direction of her friend's place.
"Looks like the rain's clearing up,"
the husband says after a moment, as the pitter-patter of raindrops on the front window comes to a full stop.
"Thank goodness."
The student sees her friend's house approaching, but the car passes it and keeps driving. That's when she feels her heart sinking in her chest.
You just missed it,"
the student says, trying to remain calm. The wife looks back past the seat and smiles at her. The student can't see anything that resembles life behind her eyes.
"Can you swim, honey?"
she says. What follows seems like something out of a nightmare. The wife pulls a small revolver while the husband drives, and they tell her to stay calm. If she stays calm, everything is going to be fine. If she screams or tries to escape, well, she'll live to regret that. For a little while, anyway. They take her to a suburban home, a nice mid-level McMansion. They force her out of the car and walk her into the yard. She's expecting to see some terrifying torture dungeon or a shallow grave already dug for her. But no, it's a normal yard, with a vast lawn, a supply shed, and a decent pool, with a pair of cinder blocks and a chain sitting next to it.
"You're going to be okay, honey,"
the husband says.
"It's all going to be over soon. You just need to do what we say for just a little longer."
"Yes, dear," the wife says.
"This isn't our first rodeo."
That much seems obvious. The chains are tied around her ankles at gunpoint. The other end is attached to the cinder blocks before they're thrown into the pool, dragging the student along with them into the water. It rushes up all around her. She draws in a deep breath and prepares to fight against drowning. But then she surfaces, her head just above the water. She looks down, sees the chain tethering her to the cinder blocks below, but the chain is just long enough to keep her head above water level. She's trapped, but she's still floating. Confused, she turns and sees the husband and wife standing on the edge of the pool, each wearing a manic grin. The husband checks his watch.
Not long now,
He says.
this is my favorite part.
The wife adds, seemingly barely able to contain her glee. The student floats in the pool, equal parts terrified and confused. There are glowing blue lights underneath the water. The jets bubble. Other than the fact that she's been kidnapped, nothing even really seems all that strange. Then she feels it. As the minutes pass, the water starts to feel strangely hot. It tingles against her skin. Is this even water? No, something's wrong. She looks down and sees that her skin, it's starting to bubble like boiling water. Every inch of her flesh, her clothes, her hair, they're fizzing. She's melting away like some human bath bomb before her very eyes. She can't help but scream. The husband and wife on the sidelines are laughing and clapping in delight. And the student can't scream for long. In a few moments, she won't have the throat or lungs to scream with. And in a few minutes more, there won't be anything left at all. The next morning, the student's mother wakes up to a quiet house. The sun is shining in through the window. Her daughter's bedroom is empty.
That girl,
She says to herself.
when's she going to grow up?
Little does she know, she will never grow up now. And perhaps if she hadn't locked her out that night, it would all have gone down very differently. No trace of the girl will ever be found. Today, we're dealing with an extremely dangerous filtration system with anomalous capabilities. But, my fellow researchers, do you know what's even more dangerous than anomalously filtering water? Not filtering water at all. According to another reputable three-letter agency, the World Health Organization, or WHO, around 1 million people die from illnesses as a result of consuming contaminated water every year. And because I'm all about containing horrifying threats to the human race, I'm teaming up with #TeamWater, a charity initiative that aims to raise $40 million to help 2 million people get long-term access to clean, safe, drinkable water. If you're able to donate, you get the official DrBob seal of approval, metaphorically speaking. And if you can't, you can still help by sharing this video around and spreading the word about #TeamWater. That's one joint operation that certainly shouldn't be classified. Unlike the matters concerning SCP-242, otherwise known as the Self-Cleaning Pool. Like many codenames assigned to anomalies by the SCP Foundation, the pun belies just how dangerous and horrifying this seemingly innocent pool can really be. 4.5 meters wide by 9 meters long, with a depth ranging from 1 meter deep on both ends to 1.5 meters deep in the center, and a total volume of approximately 53,000 liters. It was discovered after the mysterious disappearance of a New Mexico retiree who'd been an out-of-state landlord for the better part of his life. According to the tenancy records of the house, tenants had changed frequently, something that had always perplexed the landlord. His tenants just seemed to stop paying the rent and disappear without giving any kind of advance notice. After retiring, he decided to live at the property himself, and after taking a dip in the pool, he found out firsthand exactly what had happened to all of his tenants, and just like them, he was never seen again. That's when the SCP Foundation got involved and discovered what they really had on their hands here: a swimming pool capable of total matter transmutation of anything placed inside it into completely sterile, chemically pure water. And this water is quite literally as pure as any water could be, so much so that it remains pure even when placed into contaminated sources. In order to test this, Foundation researchers dyed a tank full of regular water red before pouring a glass of water from SCP-242 into the tank. The added anomalous water remained pure, floating as a transparent orb amidst the dyed liquid. It seems that almost anything can be transmuted, but the amount of time the transmutation takes will depend on the severity of the contaminant added to the water. Ordinary river water was completely purified in 7 minutes. Mucky and stagnant water from a local pond was rendered clean in less than 20 minutes, and the pool was even able to purify 50,000 pounds of tar in 12 days. And then, there are the living contaminants, but all good things to those who wait. As the self-cleaning part of the codename suggests, the anomalous attribute of the pool activates autonomously as soon as something or somebody enters. The lights turn on, the jets start pumping, the dual waterfall features start to flow, and if it's in the pool, the cleaning crawler will patrol from side to side of the pool. This is the case even when the pool isn't connected to any kind of external power source. That, I'm afraid, is when things get nasty. While the disappearance of the property owner was certainly a strange occurrence, especially given the other quick departures from the property in the past, it wasn't a definitive answer. But the Foundation's investigation was given an unexpected boon thanks to a disturbing incident recorded on an on-site security camera some time after the homeowner had disappeared. The camera captured a scene straight out of a rom-com, which quickly transitioned into something out of a horror movie. A couple in their early 20s scaled the backyard fence of the property in the middle of the night, perhaps in a state of intoxication. They disrobed and climbed into the pool for some late-night skinny dipping, after obtaining a pair of inflatable rafts from the garden shed. As soon as they entered the pool, the lights, pool jets, and pool crawler activated. At this point, the woman became nervous. But in true horror movie fashion, her male companion told her that there was nothing to worry about. The owner of the house had disappeared. It's not like anyone would really care if they were doing some benign, sexy trespassing to cap off a special date night. After 24 continuous minutes in the pool, the woman began to complain that the water was getting unusually hot and her skin was starting to feel tingly. The man at this point actually agreed. If the two of them had gotten out of the water there and then, their lives likely would have been saved. And who knows what type of relationship they would have gone on to have after that. Maybe they would have gotten married, had kids, found the cure for cancer, and won the Nobel Peace Prize. Who's to say? But that's not what happened. Instead of getting out of the pool, they climbed up onto the rafts and fell asleep, floating together in the water, holding hands. 6 minutes later, both rafts popped, and the couple was dropped into the water below. The water began to bubble and froth, slowly turning red, like a crimson bloom from the location of each of the sunken young lovers. They screamed loudly as the water swamped them, any attempts to escape made futile by their rapid molecular disintegration. Once the water of the pool had gone entirely red, the bubbling stopped. 48 seconds later, the water turned clear, revealing it was now completely empty. No sign of the couple or the burst rafts remained. The Foundation contemplated adding a lifeguard after this. Naturally, when the Foundation encounters an anomaly that has the dual effect of creating incredibly pure water and utterly annihilating any alien matter placed into it, they have a few questions. What are the general properties of the water contained in SCP-242? Does the water retain any SCP-like properties when removed from the location? In other words, they wanted to test whether the water is safe for human consumption, both while in the SCP and outside of it. It's rare that in these files we're given a comprehensive ledger of the equipment used to actually conduct a Foundation experiment, but the file for SCP-242 features a full list of requested equipment in the experiment proposal. This consists of 2 titanium atmospheric dive suits altered to fit the testing criteria, 2 Class D personnel of like gender and race, age range to within 3 years, 1 food-grade titanium barrel 190-liter capacity, and 1 remotely controlled overhead crane capable of lifting 20 metric tons. Stay tuned, there's more. 1 automated titanium siphon system, 1 wireless communication system for separate links to and from both dive suits, and 1 home fumigation tenting unit used to create a, quote, neighborhood subterfuge. It goes without saying that conducting experiments for the SCP Foundation is both complicated and costly, but let's see if the results justified all this. Test Subject A was put into one of the dive suits and lowered into the pool, where he was instructed to drink from a metal straw that fed into the pool. While this was happening, Test Subject B was instructed to get into the other dive suit. However, he would not be lowered into the pool. Instead, he would drink out of a barrel filled with SCP-242 purified water. Test Subject A shared that he found the water to be incredibly warm and that it had a strange, chemically aftertaste. Test Subject B, on the other hand, reported that the water was cool, tasteless, and immensely refreshing. Strange. Already clear differences were manifesting depending on the water's source. The musings of the scientists were interrupted by a long, loud belch from Test Subject A. It seemed that drinking the water, which he reported as being warmer and more unpleasant to taste than ever, was causing considerable gas buildup in his stomach. Intriguing. The researcher asked each of the test subjects to take another sip from their respective water sources. For Test Subject B, it was still all smooth sailing. The water was cool and refreshing as ever. But when Test Subject B took a sip, he found, to his horror, that it was stinging the inside of his mouth and throat. This led to a coughing fit where he coughed up one of his fillings. That was when the panic started to set in. Test subject A began to scream and splutter as the diving suit filled with water, coming from the pool, the diving suit itself, and his body. The transmutation had begun, but the most horrifying part was that it wasn't just happening from the outside in, but also the inside out. Test subject B, on the other hand, was having a pretty wonderful time. For him, this experiment seemed to only entail getting into a weird diving suit and drinking up some refreshing mineral water. The researcher dismissed him from the experiment, saying, "Okay, test subject B, we're moving to the next phase, which is a full medical analysis. But you'll need to, decompress before you can exit the suit. It will take several hours, so get comfortable in there. Please take a drink every time the indicator light goes on and let me know if anything changes. Use the urination adapter as needed." To which the shockingly lucky D-Class replied,
Understood. That was easy.
The debrief on the experiment read, "Testing was ended due to internal electrical and subsequent structural failure of atmospheric dive suit A. Retrieval was not attempted. Complete loss of atmospheric dive suit A occurred after approximately 15 hours. Test subject B was extracted after 17 hours. No physiological changes were detected. Subject B's urine was recovered and showed no extraordinary properties. Subject B has been released to the Class D pool group for future reuse. The water remaining in the barrel was left to evaporate and did so within the expected time frame. No residue of any kind remained. Approvals on further tests for SCP-242 are still pending. Now that the property where SCP-242 is situated is under the command of the Foundation, it's actually relatively easy to keep it under lock and key, giving it the containment class Safe. The New Mexico home is operated just like all the others on its street, with 2 Foundation researchers living there and posing as a married couple, with a level 1 guard posing as their live-in cook. I don't know about all of you, but I personally think that it would be an excellent premise for a spy family-esque sitcom. And because the Foundation has never been one to let a potentially useful anomaly go to waste, the proposal has been logged to potentially use this anomaly as a way to dispose of other hazardous SCP materials. If this proposal was accepted, it would likely mean that SCP-242 would be reclassified as Thaumiel, but until we have anything official on that, we'll play it safe and stick to safe. Access to the pool is strictly regulated, with D-Class personnel being the only ones allowed into the water, and even then, only during heavily regulated testing periods. It's best to follow the Foundation containment procedures on this one, folks. This is one pool that you don't want to dip your toe into. Well, if you want to keep your toe, anyway.
Candace Hayes, we have thy confession. A witch as brazen as you shall be burned at the stake. The crowd gathered in the small room bursts into a cheer as the judge hands down the sentence. The accused woman doesn't react, though. She looks neither scared nor afraid, but simply resigned to her fate. No time is to be wasted in carrying out the punishment that the judge has decreed. A pair of constables grab the woman by the arms and take her away. A mob follows along as the woman is led through the town, taunting and jeering, calling her a witch, a wife of Satan, and worse names. She doesn't seem affected by them, though. In fact, she looks as if she can't even see them. Her attention is focused solely on one mysterious woman who walks along with the crowd, and yet somehow seems disconnected, as if she isn't truly there either. The 2 women maintain eye contact as the constables keep pushing the condemned woman along. They lead the woman outside of town to a tall hill. The ropes binding the woman's hands are cut, and she has just a moment to rub her sore wrists before she is forced to the ground and lashed to a piece of wood as another group tosses the last logs onto a nearby pile. Once she is securely tied down, the constables step away, but then another man wearing a hood approaches. He carries a large club and without hesitation begins beating her legs. The woman's composure finally breaks, and she cries in pain from the cracking of her bones. The crowd only cheers louder at the screams from the witch. The beating has left the woman's legs mangled, but this is far from over. The woman, still strapped to the wood, is placed on the pyre, where she hangs like a scarecrow above the combustible material. The judge steps forward out of the screaming mob, carrying a torch. He loudly exclaims that for her crimes, she will be burned until dead. But the judge doesn't step forward. He instead announces that another will have the honor of lighting the flame. Another man steps out of the crowd and takes the torch from the judge. He walks towards the pyre and looks up at the woman. She is exhausted from the beating, but she lifts her head. She doesn't look at the man with the torch, though. She's looking past him, locking eyes with the mysterious woman who walked along with the crowd. The man looks angry, slighted that she won't even meet his eyes in this final moment, and without another moment's hesitation, he tosses the torch onto the pyre. The wood lights instantly, the tinder combusting and turning into a huge roaring fire. The crowd also erupts into even louder cries of celebration as the woman screams from inside the blaze. The man watches as the woman is lost behind the fire and the smoke, and eventually, her cries too are hidden behind the crackles and pops of the flames. He doesn't move until the fire has nearly burned itself out. Most of the crowd has left at this point, having gone back to their homes, content with the role they played in doing the Lord's work. As the constables pull a charred torso down from the wood and unceremoniously toss it over a steep side of the hill, the man finally turns and starts to walk away, a tear rolling down his cheek. The judge approaches and places a hand on the man's shoulder. "There, the judge says, attempting to comfort the man. "You'll find a new wife soon enough." Hundreds of people were accused of witchcraft in colonial America, and while it is likely that many were falsely accused, there is reason to believe that some were under the influence of, or were themselves, what we now describe as anomalies. And SCP-3998 is just such an example, better known as the Wicker Witch Lives. SCP-3998 is a human cadaver which dates from the late 17th century that is covered in fourth-degree burns and is missing its legs. There is also evidence of extensive blunt force trauma, but it is not known if the beating or the burning was the ultimate cause of death. At some point, the remains were collected and fastened into a scarecrow that is held together with wicker, nails, and wire. While a scarecrow fashioned from a cadaver is rather unconventional, what brought SCP-3998 to the SCP Foundation's attention were its other anomalous attributes. It constantly secretes a flammable liquid from its bones that primarily consists of ethanol and human fat, and every night between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., the corpse ignites. This fire doesn't cause any damage to the corpse, though, and it is unknown how it produces the flammable liquid or ignites. 3998 does not keep its flames to itself, though. It appears that the SCP targets those who have either killed or physically abused a romantic partner, causing them to catch fire as large quantities of boiling ethanol appear in their stomach. Their midsection will eventually melt and then explode, leading to amputation of the lower half of their body. The fire burns both incredibly hot and unnaturally fast, and is unable to be put out until SCP-3998 is extinguished. A number of historical documents related to the case have been discovered and made available to Foundation researchers that shed light on SCP-3998, including excerpts from a 17th century diary belonging to a woman who lived near where the cadaver was discovered. In the entries, the woman describes attending the wedding of her neighbors, Aidan and Candace Hayes, though Candace did not seem especially happy with the arrangement. Candace is characterized as someone who likes to keep to herself, and who does not conform to the era's idea of a good wife. As a result, it appears that she became the victim of abuse at the hand of her husband. The diarist hypothesizes that Candace has brought this fate upon herself due to her behavior, which may stem from her being under the hold of the devil. In other words, the neighbor believes that Candace is a witch. Others must have had the same suspicion, because we also have records of Candace's interview with a Judge William Stoughton, who questioned her about the accusations of consorting with evil spirits. Candace readily admitted to this, though she disagreed that it was in any way evil. She told the judge that the rituals and magics she practiced were not inherently good or bad, and that anyone was capable of using the same tools. She went on to explain that she hated her husband, that she had been forced to marry him, and that he had been nothing but cruel and violent towards her. Candace also mentioned a name, Clovis, that the judge assumed to be the demon that she had made her cursed pact with. Candace appeared to offer no defense or excuses for her actions, and the judge sentenced her to die by burning at the stake, with her husband, Aidan, being the one to light the fire. The story of this witch trial was typical of the time, and that likely would have been the end of what we know about SCP-3998. But another historical document was located that has truly given a new perspective to this anomaly. A sealed letter found in the cellar of a home that is addressed to Candace, though it appears to have been written after her death. The letter is from her secret lover and describes how they collected Candace's burnt bones from the bottom of the hill before binding them together with wicker and wire. The letter then describes how Candace's husband has recently restocked his own home with gin, which is well known to be extremely flammable. The letter ends with an affirmation of the writer's eternal love for Candace and is signed, Clovis. But perhaps the best information we have about the origin of SCP-3998 comes from an obscure local tale that was passed down orally for years and eventually documented on an urban legend website. The legend tells of a woman who promised her soul to a she-devil who taught her magic, but also offered companionship. When her husband found out, he contacted the local authorities and had the woman arrested. She was tried, her legs were broken, and she was hung up like a scarecrow before being burned alive. Her body was dumped off the side of a mountain, but the she-devil collected her bones and gave her life again. The need for revenge burned in the woman's heart, so in the middle of the night, she doused herself in her husband's gin, set herself on fire once more, and fell upon him as he slept, burning him alive so he could suffer the way that she did. SCP-3998 is currently held in a secure holding locker in Site-34 that is fireproofed and vacuum-sealed to prevent it from igniting. Every morning at 9 a.m., 3998 and its locker are cleaned to remove the secretions of flammable liquid. D-Class personnel who have been convicted of domestic abuse crimes are to always be kept at the site to ensure that they are the targets of SCP-3998, which, when it's not allowed to ignite, will result in them only feeling mild discomfort in their head and chest rather than spontaneous combustion. Due to its relatively easy method of containment, SCP-3998 has been classified as safe. However, recent developments have caused the Foundation to rethink this classification. Despite 3998 being securely contained, the number of arson-related homicides in the state of Massachusetts have actually increased following containment, with many showing the same damage to their body as would be expected in a victim of SCP-3998. And while it may be that these are the result of a yet uncaught serial killer who simply happens to employ similar methods of killing their victims, a recent re-examination of the SCP-3998 corpse has revealed more troubling details. The body of SCP-3998 does not belong to Candace Hayes, and in fact appears to be a male who was in his 30s at the time of his death. Following these new revelations, reclassification of SCP-3998 to Euclid is pending. Whether SCP-3998 is the body of Candace's husband Aiden, forced to endure an eternal punishment of burning again each and every night, or if it's some other unfortunate victim of a violent and painful death, is unknown, as is the ultimate fate of Candace and Clovis. But with the deaths that would appear to be attributable to SCP-3998 showing no signs of stopping despite containment, it can only be assumed that the Wicker Witch lives.
The hammer cracked the metal with a thud that caused the old wooden floor beneath him to rattle. Sparks flew, but the metal was refusing to cooperate again. Dripping sweat, he cursed under his breath and wiped his greasy hands on his pants. The place smelt of burnt oil, rust, and desperation, like the result of every other half-finished experiment scattered across the room. The basement had become a dumpster of failure, its floor littered with discarded weapons. The latest one, a mangled piece of junk, lay there with the others, looking just like the rest, a trophy of his mistakes. It was hot, too hot. But then again, there was no air conditioning in the makeshift lab. Not that the heat bothered him. The world outside, the real world, where the Argentine military junta was busy terrorizing guerrilla forces, was no concern of his. He was here. He was safe. Down in his concrete fortress, no one could interrupt him, except maybe his own mind, but that was another story. He had come to Argentina in the years following Germany's defeat. After the Allies liberated it, he fled, using his connections to slip away to Argentina, where there was a place for those like him. The scientist had put the past behind him. At least that's what he told himself. He swore that nothing would stop him from continuing his work, not even the fact that the world had already moved on from his twisted vision of the future. His hands shook as he dropped the hammer. The old wooden bench creaked under the weight of his frustration. For years, he'd tried to force this alien metal to cooperate, thinking it could be perfected. But it was inconsistent. It didn't bend to his will. Not yet. He didn't need this. The war was over, but he still hadn't finished. The defeat of Germany had been a failure, a mistake, and he was here to correct it, to finish what had been started.
And what better way to do that than to create a weapon that could never run out of ammunition? The loud clang of the hammer hitting the metal was his only answer, followed by a trail of sparks. One more failed attempt. This wasn't the breakthrough he had been dreaming of. No, this was just another pile of junk that would gather dust. The gun, an MP5K PDW submachine gun, refused to accept the strange alien metal, sputtering out sparks and misfires. But then, something caught his eye. The metal fused. It finally fused. This time he could feel it, a connection. He paused, wiped his brow, and stared at the gun. What were those white things where the bullets should be? He blinked. He stared harder. The chamber was filled with them. They looked like teeth. Jagged, sharp, a real mess. But human teeth. He pulled the trigger. A groan echoed through the room, coming from the weapon itself. Or was it the metal? Maybe it was just the sound of his brain breaking. The teeth fired. He stared at the weapon. "Teeth?" he mumbled, barely believing it himself. It was a submachine gun, not a dental office. He stared at the weird projectiles, unsure if this was what he wanted. This wasn't what he wanted.
"Perfect,"
he muttered, the sarcasm thick in his voice.
"Sure, teeth. Why not?"
The weapon groaned again, like it had just woken up from a long, bad dream. He pulled the trigger again. More teeth. He winced. This was not the ultimate weapon, not what he had been imagining while he'd sat in his basement for years, drenched in sweat and desperation. He stared at the teeth for a moment too long, then tossed the weapon aside like a disgruntled child throwing a toy away. It landed on the growing pile of failures. It didn't matter. It was just another flawed creation, one more mistake to add to the stack. But hey, that's how science worked, right? Fail, fail again, then maybe, just maybe, succeed. Eventually. But as he wiped his hands and stood, there was something eerily familiar about the way the weapon had grown. It sounded alive. Or perhaps it was just the stress getting to him. Either way, he had no time to dwell on it. He needed a break. The world outside was burning. But for now, the only thing he needed to fix was this stupid weapon. Just then, the house shuddered under the force of the first crash. The door upstairs was smashed in, wood splintering into jagged pieces. Soldiers piled into the small, darkened entryway like a swarm of locusts. They were coming. The scientist had no idea, of course. He was too deep in his self-imposed exile to care about the war raging outside. But they were coming. The Argentinian military, feeling the pressure of guerrilla forces nibbling away at their control, had gotten wind of an arms dealer supplying weapons, and, as luck would have it, they had been pointed in the direction of his little basement lab. An anonymous tip was all it took to set the military in motion. In their minds, they were storming a minor arms dealer's den. They didn't know he was a Nazi scientist, still hiding out in the shadows of a war that had ended decades ago. They didn't know they were about to bust in on a man who was redefining the future of weapons with teeth. The sound of boots thumping on the floorboard echoed through the house. The soldiers closed in fast. The scientist didn't register the intrusion. By the time he heard them, it was already too late. A soldier's voice shouted from above. It was muffled, but it was enough to snap the scientist into reality. He barely had time to scramble for the hidden drawers, frantically trying to shove his latest creation out of sight, hoping it would go unnoticed. His hands were greasy, his palms sweating from the adrenaline surge. He had spent days, weeks, even years on this work, and it was finally coming together, even if in ways he didn't understand. But the soldiers weren't going to care about his failures. They were going to destroy them. The basement door flew open with a violent crash. The scientist barely had time to reach for the nearest tool, a wrench, before he found himself staring up at the barrel of a rifle. A grizzled soldier stood there, framed in the doorway, eyes wide with the confidence that only a man with a weapon could have. The soldier didn't speak. He just gestured for the scientist to move back, motioning with his rifle, as if the scientist was already a defeated man. The military swarmed in, 4, maybe 5 soldiers, each with a weapon at the ready. They began tearing through the basement without hesitation. They rummaged through every shelf, throwing aside books, overturned flasks, and other equipment the scientist had meticulously organized. It wasn't that they cared about his work. It was that they had orders. Their eyes skimmed the basement like a scavenger looking for bones, their rifles swishing through the air with each swing.
Old furniture was knocked over, clutter tossed aside, and the occasional broken part of an old weapon. The scientist stood against the wall, sweating, his throat dry as he swallowed. There was no way out. He glanced at his creations scattered on the table. What they were looking for was simple. Anything that could be used against them. Anything that didn't belong in a quiet, isolated home. One soldier lifted a rusted grenade off the table, studied it, and tossed it aside, useless. Another grabbed a gun that had long since stopped firing, shook it, and tossed it away in frustration. They didn't even look at the books on the shelves, the notebooks that had once carried his genius. To them, it was all just junk. But then, a young soldier found it. He was poking around in a corner, trying to stay low and keep his hands busy. He was just a kid, really, eyes wide with the excitement of being a part of something bigger. As he picked through the mess of discarded guns and strange contraptions, his hands brushed against something cool and smooth. A small shiver ran up his spine, and he glanced around quickly, but no one was paying attention. So, he pulled it out. The weapon. The MP5K PDW. It didn't look like much, at least not in comparison to the other firearms scattered around. It was almost elegant, sleek in a way that didn't seem to fit in with the rest of the gear. The soldier stood still for a moment, staring at it, unsure of what exactly he was holding. His mind didn't quite know how to make sense of it. Was it some secret Nazi weapon? A twisted relic of a bygone era, just like the scientist who'd built it? Maybe, but that didn't matter either. He could already hear the conversations back at base. Where did you get that? How much did it cost? It was a rare find. War memorabilia, a piece of history. He slipped it into his pack, hiding it among the other seized items. No one had to know about it. They wouldn't understand. But he would. The young soldier left the room, keeping the weapon hidden under his gear, his face grinning like a kid who'd just snatched something precious from the mess of war. And as he walked out of the basement, his thoughts were already racing ahead, imagining the stories he'd tell about this particular find. But he never got the chance to tell those stories. As the soldiers made their way back to base camp, guerrilla fighters ambushed them. The attack came without warning. Gunfire erupted from all sides, tearing through the jungle like a storm. The trees cracked and splintered under the weight of the bullets, and the screams of his comrades filled the air. The soldier's heart pounded in his chest, the chaos pushing him deeper into the mess. He scrambled for cover, throwing himself behind a thick tree trunk, the bark splintering under the hail of gunfire. He reached for his weapon, but it wasn't there. His eyes darted around, the sound of bullets whizzing past his head, until he saw it, lying on the ground where he dropped it in the scramble. Then, he remembered his keepsake. He pulled the strange weapon from his pack, the weight of it odd in his hands. It wasn't like any weapon he had ever used, but the more he looked at it, the more curious he became. It seemed to hum, almost alive. "Cover me!" his comrade yelled from behind a tree, firing his rifle at an unseen enemy. The soldier nodded, adrenaline pushing him forward, heart racing. He pressed the barrel of the MP5K against the trunk, aiming at the enemy fighters who were scattered in the underbrush ahead. The sound of the jungle was deafening. The screams of combatants, the roar of distant explosions, the high-pitched crack of rifle shots cutting through the humid air. He steadied his breath, sighted in on the figure moving through the trees, and squeezed the trigger. The weapon groaned, a sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Then, with a sickening feeling in his gut, he watched teeth shoot out, flying in a wide arc. He blinked. Teeth. They flew like jagged shrapnel, more akin to dental debris than bullets. The soldier watched in horror as the teeth struck the tree ahead of him with a dull clink, leaving only tiny gashes in the bark. He swore under his breath and pulled the trigger again. The teeth hit the ground in front of the gorillas. It wasn't enough. No force, no punch. "What is this?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible above the battle. He didn't have time to rethink it. Another gorilla fired at his position, forcing him to duck. The teeth weren't working the way a bullet should, but it didn't matter. He had to keep firing. It was all he had. He squeezed the trigger again and again. Teeth. More teeth. The gorillas, taking advantage of the ineffective fire, began charging forward. They moved in clusters, using the thick vegetation as cover. He needed to hold them off, and fast. "Reload!" someone shouted. The soldier was too slow to reload with regular ammo. There was no time. His heart raced as he pressed the trigger again, each tooth flying with a sickening clatter. Ineffective. Useless. But it worked for now. It kept the gorillas at bay, if only for a moment.
The chaos of battle raged on. Explosions rocked the ground around him, sending dust and dirt into the air. He saw his comrade go down, his body crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. Another man fell beside him, his weapon knocked out of reach.
Get up! Get up!
The soldier screamed to his fallen comrades, not even sure if they could hear him. He took a breath, re-aimed, and pulled the trigger again. More teeth. This time, they struck. The gorilla he'd aimed at staggered back, but only from the shock. The teeth weren't lethal. They barely even hurt. The soldier watched as the gorilla raised his weapon, determined to fight back. But it was enough to buy the soldier some time. Just. He crouched lower, glancing at the weapon in his hands, and realized he was out of ammunition. Frantically, he opened the chamber, hoping, praying to find more. He grabbed the pouch of standard ammunition from his belt and tried to reload. The weapon didn't budge. It wouldn't accept the normal bullets. He tried again, slamming the magazine in harder, but the chamber refused to close. He was panicking. He looked back up to the battle. His comrades needed him, and all he had was this ridiculous weapon that shot teeth. The guerrilla forces were closing in. He could see them rushing forward, weapons raised.
Come on!
He yelled, struggling with the weapon. The heat of the battle was making everything feel like a blur. His breath ragged, sweat stinging his eyes, the world around him spinning. Just as he prepared to throw the weapon aside in frustration, he saw something strange. One of the teeth dropped from the chamber, and he froze. It rolled out, just like it had before. He stared at it, confused, realizing something he had missed. The weapon wasn't out of ammunition. It wasn't broken. It was waiting for its own regenerative ammunition. Before he could process this, another shot rang out from the trees, and the world went dark. The battle raged on around his crumpled body. Eventually, the guerrilla forces triumphed. The soldier's weapon, the strange weapon with the teeth, was left behind on the battlefield, unnoticed for just a moment. But one of the guerrilla fighters, eyes wild from the ferocity of the battle, spotted it. He crouched low, his fingers brushing over the cool metal of the weapon. He had seen it before, in the hands of the young soldier. Now, it was his. He picked it up, feeling the strange weight of it in his hands. It was different, nothing like the rifles they used, nothing like the weapons they knew, but it was a weapon nonetheless, and it was valuable. He glanced down at the soldier's dog tag, still hanging from the man's neck, blood staining the metal. Without a second thought, he pulled it free, tucking it into his pouch as a reminder, a trophy, a victory, no matter how small. The weapon was his now, a souvenir from the battle that had been won. The guerrilla fighter moved through the jungle, the weapon slung over his shoulder, feeling its unfamiliar weight as he trekked back to his small, hidden village. He had seen the aftermath of the battle, the destruction and the dead. The victory had come at a cost, but nothing could prepare him for what awaited him when he reached his home. As he stepped through the trees, he saw the smoke rising in the distance. His heart sank. His stomach twisted. The air, thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood, burned his nostrils as he moved closer. When he reached the village, it was gone. His heart skipped a beat as his eyes fell on the bodies lying in the dirt. The military had come for them, just as they always did. They had taken everything: his family, his home, the children who had played in the fields, the elders who had whispered stories of resistance. His mother, his brother, his wife. Gone. Grief, pure and sharp, flooded his chest. He dropped to his knees, the weight of loss crushing him. It was his fault. He had led the attack. He had brought the battle to their doorstep. More soldiers were out there. They would pay for this. With trembling hands, he reached for his trophy weapon still hanging off his shoulder. He gripped the weapon tightly, the cold metal offering him a fleeting sense of control, of power. With anger coursing through him, he aimed the weapon at the undergrowth. With a guttural, agonizing scream, he pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The chamber was empty. Confused, he tried to reload it. Why wasn't it working? He twisted, turned, pulled at the magazine, but it refused to budge. In his frustration, he didn't notice the strange sensation at first, but then, as he looked closer, something was changing. The chamber of the weapon was wet, and in the place where the bullets should have been, there were teeth. He stared at the jagged teeth as they formed. It was madness. It was absurd. But it didn't matter anymore. The gravity of the situation hit him. He lowered the weapon, his hands falling to his sides. There was no fight left in him.
The world had taken everything. The weapon, the teeth, the pain. It all felt like a cruel joke. And all he could do was stand there, numb, as the groaning weapon in his hands continued to grow its deadly supply of ammunition. There was no reason to stay anymore. The war had taken everything from him. The guerrilla fighter left the village, his heart as empty as the place he had once called home. The weapon was still with him, slung over his back like a cursed prize, a cruel reminder of the violence he had chosen to live by. He made his way out of the jungle, through the streets that had once been alive with the sounds of resistance, and now stood as silent witnesses to the destruction. There was nothing left for him in Argentina, nothing but ghosts. So he left. He packed what little he could, slipping out of the country, away from the conflict that had claimed so much. He headed north, to a place that promised peace, to the United States, a country he had heard of, but never seen. Maybe there, he thought, he could start over. The guerrilla fighter arrived in the United States with little more than the clothes on his back and the weapon still slung over his shoulder. The world was different here, strange and unfamiliar, but for him, it was just another place where he could hide. He wasn't running toward anything. He was running away from the war, from the faces of the dead, from the screams of his family. And maybe, he thought, he could leave the past behind. Maybe this new land would forget him, just as he hoped to forget the horrors he had witnessed. The guerrilla fighter found a small, quiet town tucked away in a forgotten corner of the world. He rented a small room in a dingy apartment complex, barely enough space for him and his thoughts, let alone the memories. He kept to himself, avoided the neighbors, and never spoke. The days bled into each other. He tried to forget the faces, the blood, the heat of the jungle, the stench of death, but it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Solitude became his only companion. His trophy weapon, with its teeth, remained by his side, like a sick, twisted reminder of everything that had been lost. He kept it hidden mostly, but it was always there, always waiting. As the years passed, the guerrilla fighter's paranoia deepened. The world, once a place of revolution and war, now felt like a ticking clock. Time was running out. The man became obsessed with the idea of survival. It wasn't enough to just live. He had to be ready for what came next. The doomsday prepper mentality took hold. He stocked up on everything: cans of food, water, bottles of medicine, and weapons. His small room became a fortress of supplies, stacked high with boxes and crates, like a madman preparing for an apocalypse. He hoarded weapons, a mix of everything he could find: old rifles, handguns, knives, tools, anything that could help him survive when the world came crashing down. He believed it would happen one day. The chaos would come back. He had seen it. He had lived it. He had felt it in his bones, and he would be ready. Every day, he would check his stockpiles, tighten security around his barricaded windows, and watch the news. Everything out there seemed to confirm it. The world was falling apart. Riots in the streets, governments on the brink of collapse, the signs were all there. He had no family, no friends, only his supplies, his weapons, and the weapon with the teeth, a relic of a time he couldn't let go of. The years took their toll. His hair grayed, his skin sagged, his body grew frail, yet his mind remained as sharp as ever. But the weight of solitude wore on him. He refused to confront the trauma of his past. He refused to look at the teeth, to remember the faces of his comrades who had fallen, or the family he had lost in the flames of war. He could no longer tell the difference between the nightmares and his waking life. Every corner of his small, isolated existence was consumed by the fear of what would come next. The world outside passed by without him. The neighbors came and went, their voices and laughter filtering through the walls, but he stayed silent. He had no need for human contact. He was preparing for the worst. His heart raced in the middle of the night, even though the world around him slept peacefully. He checked the locks on his windows, the cans of food stacked high, the weapon with the teeth always close by. Time marched on, but for him, it was just one long, endless day. The future was coming, but he couldn't bear to face it. Fear was all that remained. And then, one day, it came. The end. His body, frail and aging, gave out. No one noticed his passing right away. The neighbors went about their lives, oblivious to the man who had kept to himself for so many years. Days passed before anyone bothered to check on him.
He was found alone in his room, surrounded by his supplies and weapons, all of it meaningless in the end. And beside him, still in his cold, stiff hand, was the weapon with the teeth, still waiting. His strange, isolated existence had raised no alarms until the ATF and FBI were notified about the vast arsenal found in his home. When the authorities arrived, the scene was as eerie as it was unsettling. Boxes of food stacked high in the corners, weapons piled like a jumbled treasure trove, and papers scattered haphazardly across the floor. The officers worked through the hoard in silence, cataloging everything they could find, marking the weapons with official tags. It wasn't long before one of them came across something that made him stop in his tracks. Tucked between a rusted rifle and a box of ammo clips, he found the MP5K PDW, its strange, jagged chamber staring back at him. The teeth glinted in the dim light, human-like, unnervingly jagged, as though someone had intentionally jammed them into the chamber. The officer felt his gut twist, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. This was no ordinary firearm.
What is this thing?
He muttered under his breath, turning the weapon in his hands, unsure whether to be intrigued or horrified. He called over his partner. They examined it together, but neither of them could understand what they were looking at. No one in the department had encountered anything like it. Word got out about the strange weapon soon after, and it didn't take long before the SCP Foundation was alerted. The agents arrived with little fanfare, as they always did, their presence barely noticed amid the ongoing investigation. They moved quickly, their trained eyes scanning the collection for anything that stood out, and when they came across the MP5K PDW with the teeth, they knew they had found something significant. Their training had taught them to spot anomalies like this. The weapon wasn't just unusual, it was anomalous. At first glance, SCP-127 appears to be a standard MP5K PDW submachine gun, which would be nothing out of the ordinary. However, upon further analysis, it has been revealed that aside from its steel and polymer exterior, the entirety of the firearm is organic and alive. This living nature is not immediately obvious, but its biological components are present in every functional part of the weapon. One of the most striking aspects of SCP-127 is its ammunition, which initially appeared to be human-like teeth. DNA testing of these bullets revealed that they do not match any known species on Earth. They are something entirely unique, bizarre in their shape, composition, and origins. SCP-127 features two distinct firing modes, semi-automatic and fully automatic, with an audible groan when switching between the two modes. The weapon's magazine typically holds 60 shots, and once depleted, it takes approximately 3 to 5 days for the ammunition to fully regenerate. Attempts to remove the magazine have been unsuccessful, as it appears to be permanently integrated into the weapon. While SCP-127 does not appear to have any reproductive organs, as determined by scans, it does require water, calcium, and protein to remain functional and sustain its biological components. It is unclear how or why these materials are necessary, but they seem essential for its continued operation. While it poses no more immediate danger than any regular firearm, its unusual properties require specific containment measures. It is to be stored in Weapons Locker 7C when not in use, and kept suspended in a solution rich in calcium and protein to sustain its organic components. Only the research team assigned to SCP-127 is authorized to access it, and all interactions with the anomaly must be carefully monitored.